Recording in progress.
Okay, now.
You need to fill out, oh, hello, welcome. If you would like to speak tonight on any of the items on the agenda or with general public comment, you need to fill out this yellow card before that item is called. They're over on the side. You can pick up an agenda there as well and bring it to these lovely ladies that are sitting to my left, your right, up front. Okay. And then you have to really pay attention when I read the instructions because there are time limits. So first step, fill out the yellow. Second, listen to the instructions because there are time limits. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to call the Milton Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, March 26th, 2025 to order. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I am the chair, Judy Birds. This is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezoning, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan, plan map, and other related plans, and amendments to the zoning ordinance. In attendance tonight are Commissioner Brian McNeese, myself, Commissioner Kurt Nolte, Commissioner Trey James, and Commissioner Fred Edwards. Absent this evening are Commissioner Sumit Shah and Commissioner Fred Edwards.
Oh, Fred's here.
Oh, and Commissioner Vic Jones. Sorry, Fred. This is what I get when I just read down the list. Okay, we are going to start tonight with the election of officers for 2025.
Okay, well, I guess at this point, I'd like to nominate Judy Birds as chairperson for 2025. She's been the chairperson for last year, did a very good job, and I think we should give her another year.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Nolte and seconded by Commissioner McNeese. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Now for the election of our vice chairperson. I would like to nominate Kurt Nolte to be reappointed as vice chairperson for this year.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Bird, seconded by Commissioner James for Kurt Nolte for vice chairperson. Any discussion? I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, so next up is consideration and adoption of the agenda. Any changes, or would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda. Second?
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner James, seconded by Commissioner McNeese to adopt tonight's agenda as submitted. Next up is the consideration of the minutes from the December 19th, 2020.
Madam Chairman, you will need a vote on that.
Pardon?
You will need a vote on the adoption.
Okay, all those in favor in adopting the agenda? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That carries unanimously. Next up is consideration of minutes from the December 19th, 2024 action minutes. And there was, if anybody read them a little bit earlier, we did clean them up to note that the holiday dinner was held at Hyde Brewing. Any
Motion to approve the minutes from December 19th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the action minutes from December 19th, 2024. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that carries unanimously. Okay. Next up, we are going to consider general public comment. Do we have any general public comment?
We do not.
We do not. So I do not need to read the general public comment. Is that correct, Paul?
Correct.
Okay, so I will then read,
I'm sorry.
I'm then going to read the instructions because we are going to be considering rezonings and use permits tonight. And it looks like some of you are here to speak on that, and I really appreciate you being here. But listen carefully, there are time limits. Okay, so consideration of rezoning and use permits. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the published agenda. I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures conducting this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an applicant will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks, provided time remains with the allotted time. The staff of the Community Development Department will be keeping track of time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Each speaker must fill out a speaker card before speaking and leave it with a staff member of the Community Development Department. When you get up to speak, all speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and if applicable, their organization before beginning their presentation. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made within the 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of the relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak for your point of view. And that's if you are in opposition to what's being proposed. Each application has been properly filed with the Community Development Department. Signs have been posted on each site. The matter has been advertised and the notices have been mailed to property owners affected by this zoning as required by the Milton zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission's recommendation will be forwarded to the City of Milton Mayor and City Council for final disposition at a forthcoming meeting in council chambers. The Community Development Department has reviewed each application in conjunction with various agencies and departments, both internal and external to the city, if applicable. Community Development Department's recommendations, findings, and conclusions are here before us in written form, which has been made available to all petitioners and the public. Demonstration of any sort within the council chamber is prohibited. No clapping. So please refrain from any applause, dialogue with the person speaking, or outburst. Please turn off or silence all cell phones. All remarks will be addressed by the Planning Commission. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you will expect to receive yourself. In addition, the applicant shall not submit material to the Planning Commission during the meeting unless requested to do so by the Commission. All material that you wish to be reviewed by the Commission in consideration of your application should be submitted to the staff of the Community Development Department to be included in the normal distribution of packages to the Commission. Finally, to the applicant, if your petition is deferred by the Planning Commission in accordance with Milton zoning ordinance, you are required to update and obtain a new sign for reposting. Failure to update or repost will result in a further delay. There are no exceptions. And the applicants should fill this out as well. Okay. With that, we will call the first item. We had no general public comment, and that's a consideration of rezonings and use applications, U2501.
Good evening, our
Robin,
Planning Commission. Yes,
before you get started, Paul, I have a question. I don't think it matters, but
in the packet, the pre-application that was filled out 12900 Arnold Mill Road, Roswell, Georgia, on the applicant. Does that affect us on all of the other information?
So the mailing address, even though it's within the,
As long as it's a city, typically the addresses aren't reflective of the city limits. Sometimes they're reflective of the post office location. So as long as the address is correct and it is within the city limits, there's no issue.
Thank you.
okay, so tonight we are considering a requested use permit for 12900 Arnold Mill Road. And here is the location at the corner of Cox Road and Arnold Mill Road, and the Roswell city limits are the white hatched line, and then it goes around our ball fields and down Arnold Mill, and the remainder to the north and the northeast, and is within the city limits. The applicant is Ebenezer Methodist of Milton, being represented by Mr. Michael McGuire. And again, the request is a use permit for a rural event facility, as referenced in the Milton UDC as 8.7.1.h. And they are requesting a maximum of 300 attendees to be held within the existing 23,000 square foot activity center, which sits on a total of 6.61 acres. Again, the subject site is AG1, and there is an existing use permit for the church and accessory structure, now constructed, the 23,000 square foot activity center, approved in August 2020, and the existing longtime church building of approximately 5,000 square feet at the corner of Cox and Arnold Mill Roads. Included with the above approvals were 2 concurrent variances for reduced parking from 220 to 144, and also to allow parking in front of a building. The applicant intends to allow a third party to operate a rural event facility in the existing activity center with the following conditions that they have proposed, the applicant. They are proposing 300 maximum attendees, utilizing the building and outside pavilion and amphitheater. They're proposing the following hours of operation: Sunday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., and deliveries Sunday through Saturday, 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Again, it's the current zoning is AG1, which is surrounded by AG1 as well. This is located within the rural Milton Overlay District. It is outside or within the urban growth boundary, as in there should be no extension of sewer to this area. In regards to the 2040 future land use plan, it is considered community facilities right here. This is the site plan that we received on February 11th, 2025. As you can see, here is the accessory building or activity building of the church right here. And then here is the pavilion. This heavy red area is access for fire. It is not a public access at all. Here in the corner is the existing little white church for the Ebenezer Methodists. And then here we have 2 entrances and exits, one close to the apex of Cox and Arnold Mill Road, and then a second entrance and exit further to the west. And within this area is 144 parking spaces. Here are some photos of the site. Again, here is the facility looking from Arnold Mill Road. This is a view from Cox Road into the amphitheater. This is coming from the direction of Arnold Mill Road from the Little White Church going toward the pavilion. This is the west elevation on the side where most of the parking is. This is a covered porch that's part of the facility that's looking towards Cox Road. This is the main activity area within the structure. This is looking east toward Cox Road, along Cox Road, and this is a bioswale that was part of the stormwater facility requirements. There is a main stormwater facility toward the back to the north of the property, on the property. And this is looking from Cox Road to the northwest toward the 100-foot setback and 75-foot undisturbed buffer. In regards to public involvement at the community zoning information held on February 25th, both the applicant and 2 members of the public were present here at City Hall. There was one of the attendees had questions about potential future use of the space for the Milton Arts Council sponsored events, and another attendee asked if there was enough parking and what were hours of operation and traffic issues, as well as alcohol license and legal ads required for that. Then at the Design Review Board meeting on March 4th, there were no public comments, but the board, the DRB, was impressed with the finished activity center and attention to detail of both the building and the site, and the DRB voted unanimously to send a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission. The public participation report, the applicant held their required meeting on March 13th at the church sanctuary, and 1 member of the public was in attendance, and the attendee wanted to view the new facility and had no issues with the proposed use. In regards to city staff comments, the city arborist had no comments, nor did the development engineer. The fire marshal, if approved, the structure may not be occupied without a certificate of occupancy. Just to clarify this, there would be 2, if this use is approved, there would be a certificate of occupancy for the church and their uses, and then a separate certificate of occupancy for the third-party operator of the event space if it is approved. So that is why the fire marshal stated that. No comments from the Public Works Department. We did reach out to the City of Roswell Community Development Department on this issue since it's adjacent to Roswell, and they had no comments. In regards to the environmental site analysis, it is sufficient and satisfies the requirement of the UDC. In regards to the development standards for a rural event facility, the site meets the development standards as outlined in the UDC. So it's in the staff report. I won't bore you with all the details, but you have that available. In regards to the standards of a review for a use permit, which is required for staff to go through, the proposed development is located in the community, community facilities land use category of the future land use 2040 plan. The proposed use permit for a rural event facility is permitted with an AG1 zoning with mayor and city council approval. Additionally, the 2040 comp plan states has an economic development policy which states we will support programs that retain, expand, and create businesses that provide a good fit for our community's economy in terms of job skills required and links to existing businesses to locate them appropriately within the city. It is staff's opinion that the proposed use is suitable with adjacent and nearby developments and zonings which are primarily civic and low-density residential, if approved with staff's recommended conditions as outlined below. So the applicant had some requests, but staff is making these recommendations for days and hours of operations, Sunday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., with all events ceasing at 9 p.m. Friday and Saturday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., with all events ceasing at 10 p.m. And in regards to deliveries, they should be Sunday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Additionally, outdoor amplification and music allowable sound shall not register in excess of 75 dBA Sunday through Thursday between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. and 75 dBA Friday or Saturday between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. The proposed use does not appear to violate any ordinances or regulations governing land development if there is no concurrent variances, if this use permit is approved. The proposed use should have a minimum effect on the traffic flow of vehicular pedestrians along adjoining streets. However, staff has included the following condition if warranted. If more than 2 complaints are received within a 12-month period related to event traffic, the applicant shall retain off-duty police officers to manage traffic into and out of the property for every event that is expected to generate more than 100 participants. Staff notes that a newly constructed roundabout along the city of Roswell, along in cooperation with the city of Roswell DOT, will be occurring at the intersection of Cox, Ebenezer, and Idris Roads, and will be completed within 24 months. So that's just a little further to the southwest. That's always been issues in the area. The location and number of off-street parking spaces. The UDC requires 1 parking space per 2.5 attendees for this use. This would require a minimum of 120. There are 144 parking spaces, of which 6 are handicapped. The site provides adequate parking for the facility. Staff notes there are 4 parking spaces indicated just inside the 100-foot setback along the west property line and will be located elsewhere in the site outside of the setback. The site provides open space, including the pavilion and amphitheater, to be utilized by the facility and less formal open space areas along Arnold Mill that contribute to the overall rural character of the site. The site plan shows a 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback adjacent to the west and the north property lines. Although there are no specific required buffers or protective screening for the requested use, the existing church use permit required the above-mentioned undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback, and therefore provides adequate protective screening from adjacent properties. There is an existing 40-foot wide landscape strip that provides screening from both Cox and Arnold Mills roads. In regards to hours of operation, as stated earlier, staff is recommending Sunday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., with all events ceasing at 9 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., with all events ceasing at 10 p.m., and deliveries Sunday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It is staff's opinion that the above-mentioned hours and days of operation are reasonable for the proposed use and will be included in the recommended conditions. The type and style of lighting within the parking lot is compliant with the rural Milton overlay and is located outside of the 10-foot wide tree islands. In addition, lighting associated with the building architecture has been approved by the Design Review Board and complies with the rural Milton overlay district and the night sky ordinance. And one of the last items is there are 2 existing entrances and exits on Cox Road. There's an emergency entrance exit for fire protection on Arnold Mill, and these provide sufficient ingress and egress to the property. And in conclusion, the proposed rural event facility, if developed with the recommended conditions, is a permitted use with a use permit in AG1 and intends to occupy the existing activity center and adjacent pavilion and amphitheater, which is architecturally appropriate for the rural Milton overlay district. And the use and facilities were previously approved, and the applicant is only trying to expand their customer base beyond church congregants to the wider community. Therefore, staff recommends approval conditional of U25-01 for rural event facility use permit. And in regards to the recommended conditions, if this petition is approved by the mayor and city council, the following recommended conditions are outlined. To the owner's agreement to restrict the use of the subject property as follows: a rural event facility with a total of 23,000 square feet located on 6.61 acres, accessory structures to include the existing pavilion with outdoor fireplace and adjacent outdoor amphitheater, substantial compliance with the site plan submitted to the Community Development Department on February 11th, of 2025. And again, going over the recommended conditions of days and hours of operation, Sunday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., with all events ceasing at 9 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., with all events ceasing at 10 p.m., deliveries Sunday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., outdoor amplification of music, allowable sound shall not register in excess of 75 dBA Sunday through Thursday between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m., and 75 dBA Friday or Saturday between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. If more than 2 complaints are received within a 12-month period related to event traffic, the applicant shall retain off-duty police officers to manage traffic into and out of the property for every event that is expected to generate more than 100 participants. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions you may have from staff.
Does anyone have any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant and those in favor?
Is there a standard already in the UDC for event centers like this related to time of operation?
No, it is, well, I need to go look. Yes, I think there is a maximum amount. I can give you that, which is more lenient than what they
Okay.
proposed.
The question I would have is how do we, if it's different than other, if we're setting a different policy specific to this facility, how do we don't have the staff or the people to regulate that? I'm just trying to make sure that we're not creating more work for compliance if we're not going to be able to do that.
So our experience has been that we have one other active rural event facility, and they're very cognitive of the conditions of zoning.
Okay.
And I think they've been in operation almost 10 years, and we have not had any complaints about operating past the time or noise issues. So yes, I think it's because we have definitive opening and closing times, we can make sure that it's in compliance. And most of that comes from complaints. It could come from complaints from neighbors. And if they do complain, then we go to the applicant or to the to the business owner and say, hey, we've had complaints, this needs to stop, and go from there. And if needed, we could ask the police to just cruise by, and just make sure that everything is shut down at the appropriate time.
Okay. I'm wondering if this is creating another exception or if this is similar to the existing space that we already have in the city.
I do have those approved times of operation if you guys want to know what the other facility has.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't really have a preference on their times of operation.
Okay. I
My
do have that
preference would be
available if
to
anybody wants to know that.
create
I'll be reminded.
consistency so we're not creating problems for ourselves later.
Robin, clarification. The amphitheater use, was that given a use permit similar to what is now in 8511B when it was approved by the city in August of 2020? Or was it just declared that, yes, we intend to be an amphitheater? I'm wondering if they need an amphitheater use permit too.
I think it was considered an associated accessory use to that church. So there was we did not see the need for another use permit just for the amphitheater. I mean, it's not that large. I mean, it's just a smaller outdoor area for congregation. And
That sounds like that's a no. They do not have an
no,
amphitheater
they do
use
not
permit.
have a separate use permit, no.
I don't remember the amphitheater, I could be wrong, I'm not even sure. I remember the amphitheater being discussed back in 2020.
So I know there was a pavilion. I
Correct.
mean, I do have,
And the youth center,
right.
those are the things that were really discussed. I don't remember anything about an amphitheater. And again, I could be wrong, but it seems like now, and I'm sorry, if an amphitheater for 300 people, I don't know if I'd consider that small.
I'm not sure that the amphitheater is, and you can speak to after the applicant
Yeah, it's-
makes their presentation, and they can explain more what the idea of the amphitheater. I don't believe that it's for 300 people, but he can clarify the.
But again, the
applicant
use
that.
permit goes on for in perpetuity, right? So if we say this is a 300 people can use this and we approve an amphitheater, that's there forever. So, I mean, I think we need to hear from the applicant and those in favor of and
Right, and I can look at the site plan of the previously
Yeah.
approved
It's referred to as a pavilion.
submittal.
It is pavilion and
Yeah.
it's sitting on steps. Robin, I know you went past it, but could you show where the nearby residences are with respect to this property?
Sure. So, let me get to a picture that, yeah, oh no.
You've got 'em.
So, directly across the street, as you can see in the green, is the park, and then next to that is a private school. And then right under the word Roswell is the backside of residences. I believe it's called Etris Walk across the street. And those are the backsides of those houses right there where the word Roswell is.
And then refresh my memory, and we're going to hear it later, but the plan is there will be residences across the street as well as that gets developed out as part of the,
Oh, along
And
Arnold Mill.
along Arnold Mill?
Yes, but if the plan is approved, there is a fairly large rural view shed that would be created along this area. And then a possible hamlet of more commercial, small scale commercial right at the intersection right here. But yes, you are correct that along here, it is contemplated this would be the backside of possible development, but with a large rural view shed, yes.
And then-
I believe it's 100 feet.
what's the use on the purple?
The purple that is the driving range.
Okay,
So
the golf range. And then on the other side of that is,
another
resident.
church.
and then residential to the northwest? of-
Yeah, so that is also in Roswell. This subdivision here is in Roswell.
And what's on the little yellow strip right between the golf
It's-
driving range?
It's
and
a
the
single
church?
family residence.
So that's a residence too?
Right, but there is a 100-foot setback and a 75-foot undisturbed buffer adjacent to that one. And right now, on the Arnold Mills side, this parcel is what the city has recently purchased, and the remainder of it's undeveloped, and you'll see more details on that with the Arnold Mill overlay district. So,
One more question. If this property had been zoned C1 or mixed use and they wanted to do an assembly hall, it would be a different use permit, correct?
right, if it was
C1 or mixed?
C1, yes, it would be, we're actually working on that to make it a use permit
Right.
for C1, yes.
But in that case, the conditions are that all sound must be confined to the indoors.
That's correct, yeah.
And the other event facility, the limit on their sound, I don't call it noise because it's music, sound at the nearest residential line is 45 decibels, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Right, and that was with the idea, I think there was concern about the structure. It's speaking to, I have it in front of me. Yes, Friday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Music ends no later than 11 p.m., maximum 45 dBA 1 hour prior to music ending. But yes, that would be measured at the property line.
And just for clarification, 55 decibels is twice as loud as 45 decibels. It's not just 10 points. It's a logarithmic scale, so every 10 points is a doubling of volume.
Okay?
And this is they're looking at 75? Is that what?
That's what staff's proposed. That doesn't mean, if you guys feel like there's a more appropriate amount, then That's your,
And
So if
then,
you
does
can
that
make
answer your
those-
question about the hours? Because these are different hours now than,
And for clarity, what is the other rural event facility? Is it Matilda's?
No, Little River.
Little River Farms at Batesville and
Got it.
Taylor Road.
And their hours, to confirm, their operating hours run through 11 PM on the weekends?
Correct. Friday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Music ends no later than 11 p.m., maximum 45 dBA. 1 hour prior to music ending. Alcohol ceases service 15 minutes before music ending. Facility closes at midnight. It's pretty late.
is there any reason why this is 7 AM versus, I mean, now they're looking at 7 AM for deliveries and open for
I
business?
think that, and again, the applicant can explain, so, but if I were to guess, I think that's earlier activities because they're looking to utilize the facility more for maybe corporate uses. So if they have a morning meeting and they need to get ready for breakfast, again, please, if it's not answered by the applicant, you can ask him that. But I suspect that that's why it's earlier. It's not that they're planning to have early morning weddings or big bashes at 8 a.m., but it's probably more for more genteel type of activities.
Hopefully.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, shall I call the applicant and all those in favor?
Yes.
Okay, so if the applicant and all those in favor, please remember to identify yourself by name and address, and you have a total of 10 minutes to present.
They both said PC. Wait. Ah. Oh my goodness. I swear.
And Robin, if we could, we don't have a physical copy of the conditions unless we brought them with. So if somebody could go get us a copy while we're listening, that'd be great.
I have a few.
We ready? Good evening. My name is Michael McGuire. My address is 841 East Shore Drive, Canton, Georgia. I am both a member of Ebenezer Methodist, but I'm also the chair of the trustees, and I'm here to represent the church in this application. And I will make a very short presentation in deference of both your time and anybody else that wants to speak. I'll remind everybody here that this church was founded in 1853 and has been a church ever since that time. And we are lovingly known as the Little White Church on the Corner. Again, starting in 1853, and how this all came about is a former member passed away and bequeathed a lot of money that became the Pardue Family Foundation. And that Pardue Family Foundation went about acquiring, we went from 1 acre to 6.5-ish or so to have this come to fruition. That's how we got here today. I want to be clear about the church right from the beginning. It is our mission, as this statement says, to know the love of God, grow as disciples of his son, Jesus Christ, and to go share that love with others. And that is our number one mission. That's number one. Number two, though, as we started about this facility, we've written this out here, is to be a blessing to the surrounding community through Christian activities and through community activities. And that's where this whole thing began. And I will just simply say that when we came through the first time, I don't think we clearly understood the difference in the possibilities for this being a community center versus a church facility. And so there became the confusion. And as we got closer and closer to our CO, you'll see what we're going to be doing in this facility And it dawned on us, well, I'm not sure it dawned on us other than Robin called, you should be proud of what she does for you guys, and said, I think you're going to need to come back for another permit. So that's how we got here. Inside the hall, you've seen the pictures, and I'll quickly go through a couple of those, but I want you to understand the way this is set up. This is, I'm going to call it the Great Hall for lack of any other word. And so this is showing you a picture of, there's a conference here, or there's a wedding here, a banquet here. There's the opportunity for, this is a warming kitchen. I'll come back to this elevator. This is a full-fledged elevator, which is going to act more as a dumbwaiter probably than anything. A warming kitchen, and this will become a coffee shop with a nice soft seating area out here. This stuff can be moved everywhere. As Robin said, 2 large porches with outdoor seating. This is a fireplace that's outdoors, a large outdoor seating area here in the patio above that. And then this great hall with a huge stage. That has the opportunity not only to have small concerts in here, to have plays, have civic activities, et cetera. And that was the vision that the Pardue family had. And so I just want you to have that picture in your head of kind of what's going on the upper floor. And then we go downstairs, and it becomes more about classrooms and meeting rooms and functions and those sorts of things that corporate users will use, that we will certainly use for classes and education and nurseries and all of that, et cetera. Now, I put this here as a reminder to talk specifically about why we're here. And part of that was driven by, this is a full-fledged commercial kitchen. And I really encourage you guys to come tour this thing. This is any restaurant you've ever been into, kind of a commercial kitchen. And that was giving us the ability to feed upwards of, this thing was originally zoned and approved for 400, I'm gonna get this right, Robin, 430 people in this facility. We've agreed to limit the outdoor functions, the outside functions, if you will, to 300. But this kitchen was developed for that. And quite frankly, if you know us, and more than half this audience is here, so I won't say much bad about how old we are. We were not running this commercial kitchen with all of us who typically are in our typical little white church kitchen. We needed somebody to do this and help us with it and make it available to the community. And we've reached an agreement with a company called Gracious Gatherings, and they will be managing this. And so that's where this started, by bringing them in and the ability for them to bring this to the community. Weddings are a big deal, and quite frankly, being able to serve alcohol is an issue. And I want to make it clear that we have, as a church, taken a vote church-wide. It was the whole church to have no alcohol, 0, with any church function. I don't care what the function is. If it's a church-sponsored function, there will be no alcohol. The only alcohol that gets served here will be if Gracious Gatherings has a corporate gathering for whatever reason and they want to have beer and wine, that's fine. It's limited to beer and wine. Mm-hmm. If you have a wedding and you have a reception afterwards, it's beer and wine. There's no alcohol of any kind. And we've agreed to that as a stipulation. I show this picture really quickly, so I won't much of your time, but these guys have been doing this for a very, very long time. They're Christian-based. Chef Paul, that's his picture there. Super guy, has a couple of different 501c3 outreach programs. He teaches people to do what he does. People who have had gotten in trouble, let's say that way. They don't have a job. That's what he does. And this place will give him that opportunity to continue to do that. And then a few pictures. I just want you to see what the facility looks like today. We're on the verge of getting our CO. So a lot of this hasn't been seen by anybody. What's funny, I'll stop and say, the one person who showed up at my neighborhood meeting was the lot that you were asking about. That was in the picture. I think that lot was colored either white or yellow. It was a one single family home. That is the owner of the golf range. He's living in that house, and he came to say, I want to see what it looks like finally, because he's our next door neighbor and he's fully in favor of what we're doing. Robin's already shared some of these pictures with you, but this hall is available to the community, and we intend to make it that way, not only for the community, but for our church. And with that, I'll stop and let you ask any questions.
Actually, what we usually do is wait until we've heard all the
Oh, good.
comments, and then we'll bring you back up.
So So we have so he's used about 6 minutes, so yeah,
Great.
it's about a minute late.
So do we have anybody else that would like to speak in favor?
No, not in favor.
Okay. I will then ask for, how many people do we have in opposition?
So we have one. I have 3 that's indicated in opposition and 2 that is neutral, but I think wanted to hear what was going on to
Okay.
get more information, so.
Great. Shall we call the first speaker?
The first is Samantha Evans.
Hello, I'm Samantha Evans. I live at 507 Etris Court. I am the neighbor immediately across the road from Cox. Every aerial image shows our house here. The 40-foot landscape buffer that was mentioned, I think, is a gross overestimation of what's there. It's been clear cut. There's some new grass, some sparse trees, and so that's what we see is a beautiful facility, but a noisy one already. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old that go to bed at 7:30. I'm extremely worried about these decibels and about the time specifically, I mean, all of it, but the outdoor amphitheater in particular is pointing right towards our house. It's not a small amphitheater. You could easily get 300 people out there. Mr. James, I have the same concerns about the compliance. We're already needing to call the police to come check on Legacy Park next door. There's loitering there. There's people after the hours of operation. And so I don't want to have to be out there with a decibel reader every night at my property line, which is very close when I'm supposed to be inside with my kids at night. And so I want to leave time for other people to speak, but those are major concerns of mine.
Thank you.
Next comment person is Sarah Moen.
Sarah Moen, 130 Providence Plantation Drive. I'm the HOA president of Providence Plantation, the winery neighborhood, and I oppose the conditions recommended by staff for this for-profit commercial use. 75 decibels is between heavy traffic and police siren noise. Little River Farms is conditioned to only allow amplified sound inside the enclosed atrium or within the barn to 45 decibels. Matilda's is conditioned to 70 decibels, with proposed hours of operation of 7 a.m. to 10 or 11 p.m. Mondays through Fridays. Porter Academy, an adjacent private school for children with learning disabilities, could be severely impacted. 40 to 70 decibels can mask speech. 70 plus decibels is considered hazardous. Anything over 45 decibels may be harmful to the children with auditory processing issues and impede the concentration and learning of any number of students whose parents pay for them to attend that private school. The city would be reactionary by waiting for 2 complaints or worse, an accident, before requiring an officer to patrol. All adjacent residential property owners who currently have a very quiet and peaceful existence are not protected fully from this commercial for-profit use. The applicant stated to me at the CZIM that the church's on-site catering company would be applying for an alcohol license. Please take all of this information into consideration during your discussion of conditioning and ensure you protect the surrounding stakeholders and taxpayers. Thank you.
The next speaker is Ryan Evans.
Hello, Ryan Evans, 507 Etris Court, Roswell, Georgia. I am the spouse of Samantha Evans. We are literally across the street. We can see it from our own house. Inside our house, we can see the building. That shows you how little protection there is from sound, visuals, people, traffic. It is not secluded. I know the pictures that were shown there have Roswell dragged across several homes that are directly across the street. So it really misconstrues how many residents there are directly across the street, not 20 feet directly across the street. I counted, there's over 20 single-family homes within 1,000 feet of this property. The Little River Farms has 0 properties within 1,000 feet. That's probably why they're not getting noise complaints. Also because it's 45 decibels and inside. Big difference here. It's a suburban area. It's a residential area. It's true if you were putting blinders on and look northwards, it's AG1. If you literally turn around and look back at the south side of that property, it's all residential. And we have young kids. We can't have amphitheaters. We can't have weddings. We can't have drunk people wandering around any weekend. It's like having neighbors that have house parties all the time. That'd be very concerning for us.
The next speaker is Rocco Pizza.
Hello, my name's Rocco Pizza. I live at 511 Etris Court, Roswell, Georgia. I'm next door to the Evans, so again, I'm very close to the property. I do want to say I'm excited about this property. I was there back in 2020 when they presented the initial plans. I think what's happened since that initial plans, there's been some scope creep. I didn't hear anything about an amphitheater and an outdoor venue from those original, ideas where they invited us as neighbors to come and see what was going on. Also didn't get the invite for what they mentioned on the walkthrough that they mentioned with the neighbor. I don't know if it's because we're across the street in Roswell and we have Roswell City versus City of Milton. So some of this was, I think, a little concerning, understanding that Gracious Gatherings, not Ebenezer, is actually who's in control of the event center, since they're going to be managing the process. Kind of has to take that into, they're in control of what facilities or what events are going to be taking place. So with alcohol, with an outdoor amphitheater that is about, can hold up to 300 folks, and then the 75 decibels less than 250 feet away from my property or from my home is very concerning. And I think Commissioner Burge, as you mentioned, the decibel levels, every point is exponential. So it's not just 75 versus 45. That's considerable. And then, as Commissioner James mentioned, I think just consistency with regulations and how come one event center in proximity to another residence is at 45 decibels and this one is at 75 decibels, I think should be looked at. And if we could get any details on the ramifications of non-compliance with the sound ordinance, I think that would be helpful, just to kind of know what is in play. That's all I had. Thank you.
And that is all the comment
Okay.
cards.
And then, since he has time left, do we give the applicant time for rebuttal?
Yes, we have about 4 minutes left for rebuttal.
Thank you. Let me do this. I'm wondering if I got a better picture. So I want you to picture this pavilion if you've been by there. Okay. Wow. Wish I had a better picture of this. So this pavilion was built. I'm going to tell you that probably 100, maybe 120 people could fit in there and sit. It's a Bill 50 by 70. Is that right? 50 by 70 pavilion. And then 3 steps down, let's go back to this. Those are seats for all intents and purposes. And then just below this is a brick paver, if I could call it this, stage. And it's 50 feet wide and not even 40 feet deep. We're not holding Def Leppard concerts out here. That's not what this is intended for. This is for skits or plays or for the pastor to do his Easter sunrise service, which we will hopefully be doing out here. So that I don't anticipate, none of us anticipate that we're having an event out here that would need 70 decibels. So if we need to have a different decibel level for the outside amphitheater, we're good with that. I don't have a problem making that adjustment. I was just trying to think if I had another. So if you picture this amphitheater there, you just step off the end of it, you got those 3 seats. And like I said, 30 feet out is this brick paver patio is probably a better way to do it. We called it an amphitheater, and that word in my building vernacular has a whole lot of connotations to it. It's not what you're thinking. It's not that at all. I'm trying to remember what else came up that hit my thought process. Nothing we're going to be doing inside. Oh, Gracious Gatherings in control. I want to make sure this is on the record. Ebenezer Methodist is in 100% control of this facility. We have a lease with Gracious Gatherings. As a part of that lease, they must adhere to our discipline, period. Whatever they're doing, it has to meet our goals, our discipline, and what we're doing. We're talking about weddings here. We're talking about the city having a meeting there. We're talking about a corporation. We had a company come to us thinking we were going to be open and have 300 employees, and we have a meeting that's a 2-day conference. Can we have it in your facility? No, we don't have our CO yet. It's that kind of thing. Milton's own Arts Council came to us and said, they were one of the 2 that came the night we had the meeting here. Oh my gosh, you mean this could be available to us? We have no home. And the answer was, heck yes. They came and they took a tour of the facility, and they're floored because they have no place to have their plays or their skits or whatever they're doing for the community. This is what this is for. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about some rock concert spilling 75 dBs out of this building. That's not going to happen. So with that, I'll stop and answer any questions you have.
Anything else on public comment? If not, I'll conclude comment and open it up for questions from the commission.
Do you want to close a public hearing?
She closed the public portion. She's going to have the comments to be part of the hearing.
I've closed the comments. So now it's questions from us, the staff or the applicant, or anyone else for that matter.
I guess going back to what one of the gentlemen out there said, Rocco, again, and if I remember this correctly, and I want to go back and look, it was August 2020 that we came before this. I know we made a number of conciliations or variances at that time because it was positioned, as far as I remember, at the outward, the pavilion, but I remember more of this thing being directed at a youth center. You know, for the youth, a place to go after church. That's what the outside place was, to mill around. I don't think it was ever mentioned that it would be run for weddings or any type of rural event. And that was only a couple of years ago. And it looks like it certainly wasn't built. It looks like it was built for that. It doesn't look like it was built as a youth center. It looks like we were told one thing. It looks like it's turning out to be something completely different. Am I accurate? Again, if it was discussed back in 2020, I'll go back and double check. But Robin, do you remember anything about this in 2020 outside of a pavilion and a youth center?
Well, I think it was an activity center and anything that was related with that. And that's why, as it progressed, we've asked them to come back for this rural event facility because it is outside the regular activities of the church or even church-sponsored events. So that's why we're here tonight, for you to review that. So,
okay, because again, well, that's what I've got for right now. And I think just one more, the hours. I mean, for this, if it's no concerts, I don't imagine why it has to go till 10, 11 outside with the amphitheater and some of that. So, well, I mean, we'll keep talking about it.
Yep.
Mr. McGuire, do you have any issues with?
Do what now?
Do you have any issues with kind of adhering to the same times? Is it Little River that we're talking about? That's the other event center? Is that right?
actually, in some ways, Little River is more extensive than what they are.
So,
In some aspects. So,
well, on the
River-
times and on the sound, I would think based on proximity to other houses and residents, Little River should be, I mean, they're kind of in the middle of nowhere compared
Well, it
to
says, let me just
the intersection there.
say this, Friday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. So music ends no later than 11 p.m., maximum 45 dBA, 1 hour prior to music ending. Alcohol ceases 15 minutes before music ending. Facility closes at midnight. I think that midnight part was about, all the workers leaving and cleaning up. So that's why in our proposal for this, we said that the event ends an hour before, and that allows for the staff to be able to clean up and to vacate. And that's still, our proposals, I think, even an hour earlier than what Little River Farms is. Now, you're correct about the DBA. And later on, it said that amplified sound of music shall be located within the enclosed portion of the atrium. So I think there was some concern with this, that even within the atrium, if there were loud bands, that's, it shouldn't exceed 45. And that's why they also didn't want to have amplified sound outside. Everything had to be enclosed.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And there's a lake next to it, so water tends to amplify sound, or it travels across water.
So do you have a problem with the proposed times?
No, we can go later. I think that's what she's cut. I had no problem with the times that Robin and I talked about cutting an hour out of what Little River had. And again, as Robin suggested, so a wedding event, and let's say we're saying this thing's got to shut down at 11 based on what she's proposed.
Yeah.
The activities truly have to stop at 10. That means everybody leaves. That giving gracious
clean up
gatherings
and-
or an hour to clean up and get out of there. So we've cut 2 hours, if you will, out of the activities as compared to the Little River facility.
But Trey, I reckon back to the event facility we had here in Crabapple, different code, but they needed the morning because they planned to do Bible studies and have groups in for Bible studies or corporate meetings. So I think here they're proposing 7 a.m. largely because they might have morning corporate groups come in.
Yeah. My main question on timing was whether we were causing the city more problems with compliance. And if that's a no, then I'm great with that. I didn't hear a lot of public comment on time. So did anybody have a time complaint? Y'all had some time complaints? Okay.
Two
I guess
things.
my question back would be if it's a time complaint relative, let's say to the amphitheater, to what's outside, let's agree on a time limit for that activity, which is where the possibility for sound traveling across Cox Road and entering our neighbors' yards, which is not what we intended. It's not what we wanted.
Sure.
It's most of the stuff is going to be handled in what I'm calling the Great Hall. That's where it's going to be. We envisioned that these. I want to have a wedding. I want to have it outside. I want to have whatever service, and it's outside in that pavilion. We're not. Again, the word amphitheater probably should have never have entered this discussion. It's not that. And I beg you to come see it, because that's not, you will not think that this is an amphitheater in the way we think of Chastain Park amphitheater. It is not that.
A couple things. I'm troubled with the reference to amphitheater when they did not, it would appear, get an explicit amphitheater use permit with the necessary variances, et cetera. So to me, somehow any reference to amphitheater, that doesn't mean, can they have the wedding under the pavilion? To me, that's not an amphitheater. An amphitheater to me is, gee, I'm going to have
It's designed with
band
sound and acoustics in mind.
presentate, yeah.
Right.
So, and the other is finding the right decibel level. Personally, 45 is as measured at the property line of the residence. And in the case of Little River, that's 1,000 feet away.
Yeah.
40, so if Brian and I were having a conversation right now, that'd be 55 decibels. 45 decibels is like a whisper. So 45 might be too low. But I also get concerned about, yes, the band is inside, we're having a great time, let's have a big dance right before the end at 9:55 and crank it up and the doors are open. And the music, as we know from a commercial establishment here, you open up the doors, you hear it. So somehow, but the key has to be, typically with sound, you're measuring it from any residential property line. So if the neighbors go out to the back of their yard and it's only supposed to be 55 decibels, it better be 55 decibels, whatever we pick as that number.
Yeah.
But I think it's less than 75 and it might be less than 70. Personally, I think it's probably bigger than 45 because that's a hard standard to
Yeah,
meet.
it's really hard.
You know, if two people are talking, yelling to each other in the parking lot, that could be over 55 at the property line.
Yeah.
Fred?
No, my couple points are more physical. I see the septic system that's there. Has that been changed?
It has.
So that
It has. A
can
whole new septic
take
system has been installed.
people
Yeah,
and the restrooms
yes,
in the building are.
absolutely. We fully meet the code.
The other point that I picked up on the print, after you said you had 2 entry and exits, would any of those be connected to Ears Road across the street?
No. One is, the first one, I took the site plan out because Robin had it in hers. The first one that's closest to Arnold Mill Road is pretty aligned with that so that cars could come and go. In fact, we've been coordinating with the city when there's something going on in the ball fields and we don't have any activity and they want to use our parking lot, they can use it and the families can get across the street. That's been happening for a long time and we will continue to do that. So they align. The other entrance is pretty far, in my mind, pretty far down Cox Road away from Arnold Mill. And we removed any entrance, as Robin said, from Arnold Mill completely. There's only the fire entrance. If you go out there, there's some bollards out there that the fire truck can just run over to get to it, but there's no entrance off of Arnold Mill Road at all.
Right.
Yeah. And I will say this to you, Mr. Nolte, that one thing that I did with Robin, because as we got into this, I started going, gosh, why are we having to come back for this particular permit? Because the LOI, the letter of intent that was written at the time in 2020 or whatever it was, it read, quite frankly, like exactly what we're talking about. When you read it, it talks about all those activities. It was the advent of deciding that we would have this gracious gathering that brought Robin to say, I think you need to come back for this permit. The plans are identical, including the amphitheater, which now I'm going to start to hate that word. The little stage that's sitting out there beyond this pavilion. Nothing has changed. What was presented to you and what was presented to the council is exactly what we've built.
And but I don't think weddings and all that was mentioned at the time of doing it. That's my only, the other semantics wise.
Yeah.
Gracious gatherings.
Yep.
If they're hosting a wedding, is that a church sponsored event?
It is not. Well, hang on. No, wait. Back up. It could be.
But it might not be.
It might not be.
I think
So
your wording was very careful when you said about alcohol, that you would not have any alcohol at church sponsored
Correct.
events. So now if Gracious Kitchens or whatever gatherings comes in and they host a wedding, does that mean they will have alcohol?
no,
Okay, so no alcohol.
no alcohol.
Okay.
And my
Oh,
pastor,
beer and wine. Yeah, no liquor.
my pastor is here who will stand up and tell you that'll be the case.
Okay.
'Cause-
Does he already have a permit for beer and wine?
Say that again.
Does the gathering have permit already?
They do not. They do
So
not. They
they
could
have
not
to
get a
apply.
permit. Correct. They could not get a permit.
For a permit?
That's
to
right.
serve?
He's got to apply. We've got to get through this with you and have the conditions that we agreed to go before council. And then once the Rural Event Center is approved, then Gracious Gatherings has to come back and apply and go through the whole process again to get a permit to be able to even serve beer,
For alcohol
beer
permit.
and wine.
They have to get it's a separate entity for alcohol permit.
Right.
But I just want to be clear that it's not that no alcohol would be served in this facility. It's only when it's church-sponsored events, there would not be alcohol.
Right.
And that's
So I just
church
wanna
policy.
clarify
That's
it's
not
getting a
legal.
little-
It's just church internal policy for church.
If a member of our church wants to have their wedding there, as far as we're concerned, that's a
Yeah.
church sponsor,
It's great.
no alcohol.
Got it.
Okay. What if it's a corporate event and they want to have, hard liquor?
No,
No hard
There's
liquor.
no hard liquor.
alcohol.
So
Okay, all right.
the alcohol ordinance for the state is they cannot serve hard liquor through their license if Gracious Gatherings gets it.
if it helps put weight behind that, I can send you the minutes from the meeting of both the full congregation voting on it and the council after that.
And Robin, whatever we decide tonight transfers to any future owner of the property, correct?
The use permit does, but the alcohol license does
Right.
not.
But the use permit is what I'm referring to.
Correct.
Okay.
And then, Rob, I think you, in your presentation, because again, part of the whole Arnold Mill plan, that area has, been identified as being horrendous traffic, no matter what happens. And I think in yours, you said that adding a 300 event facility there, you've got no concern about adding that for the traffic portion of this? I think did I misread
Right, I
that?
mean, basically, talking to the transportation department, that they don't have any concerns about the traffic. And then we added that condition that if there's issues with traffic, they would be required to have off-duty officers. So, yeah.
Again, I'm very.
I think driving that road as I have, that 300 people, even 100, 150 more on that road at any time would be bad, let alone 300. So the timing will be important.
Yeah.
But I think it will be definitely necessary to have an officer.
I agree.
I mean, I think that the issues, I'm not sure if there's, I don't live over there, but I don't know if there's traffic that happens at 6 PM on a Saturday night, that it's gridlock coming down Arnold Mill. I wouldn't imagine it is. I think
The traffic is really bad
Yeah,
right there.
it's both. I live over there. It's both ways. In the
Yeah,
morning, it's
both
coming
ways.
down. At night, it's going up, and it's not good. And again, I'm very, very uncomfortable leaving it up to our enforcement, having somebody have to call and complain, who's monitoring that, and then doing that. I think as a city, we do not. And Fred, I don't mean to push you, but we do not do a good job with enforcement on almost anything. So I think putting the onus of that onto the city or neighbors to call, I don't think I'm very concerned about that.
I think the roundabout that goes in at Cox and Arnold Mill will have a significant impact in a positive way.
It's Cox, Etris, and
Weston.
Ebenezer Road. It's not
It's
at,
not Arnold Mill.
it's
Isn't there a
not at-
proposed roundabout there, or is it going to be?
Not a-
There's, yeah, there's two
Yes.
proposed
Is
plans
there-
that aren't done yet, but
No, it's in the
Not-
concept plan only.
It's
a
concept.
Yes.
that was top secret. I wasn't supposed to say
It's
anything
not a,
about
it's not a
that.
secret, but it's a
Okay.
concept.
And I know we're doing a lot of work.
So that would have a significant impact.
I'm sorry. I know we're doing a lot of work on the Arnold Mill plan. Has this been run by the Arnold Mill plan that we're spending a lot of money on, somebody drafting for us and the vision and all that? Has somebody sat down with them and walked through this? Is what the impact they think this would have on the area?
Well, this was already being built there, so we didn't
But-
think about the event facility as such, but
Correct. I know the building's done, but again, adding this many people from 7 to 10 every day which is what we're agreeing to. Have you talked to them about how that would impact the Arnold Mill plan? 'Cause again, this exact intersection has been talked about over and over again of being just a nightmare to start with.
I think it will activate the node for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so far I'm hearing questions about the reference to amphitheater,
Decibels.
the sound level, the
Can I get clarification?
hours
on
of,
this?
hours of operation and the traffic. And, okay, go ahead, Brian.
I just wanted to get clarification on the sound levels and decibel levels for Little River.
Yep.
Just clarification on what was agreed for that rural event
Can you
facility.
speak a little louder inside?
I'm sorry, just wanted to confirm what the decibel limits are for the other rural event facility.
Okay, so I'll go through it again. So hours of operation shall be the following: Friday through Saturday, 9 AM to 11 PM. Music ends no later than 11 PM. Maximum 45 dBA, 1 hour prior to music ending. Alcohol ceases service 15 minutes before music ending. Facility closes at midnight. Sunday through Thursday, 9 AM to 10 PM. Music ends no later than 10 PM. Maximum 45 dBA, 1 hour prior to music ending. Alcohol ceases 15 minutes before music ending. Facility closes at 11 PM. And then amplified sound of music shall be located within the enclosed portion of the atrium.
And where is the 45 decibels measured?
I mean, it's measured at the property line, which would be either Taylor Road or Batesville or the interior property lines.
But it does not, it does not allow outdoor amplification of music. Did I hear that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
yes.
So no allowance for amplification, but here, what I heard, Mr. McGuire, you talk about was the intention was not to have full-blown concerts at
correct.
that, what I'll call a pavilion. So I'm just wondering.
Do you need amplified
That's what I'm
outside?
saying, yeah.
We have a sound system out there for if I'm giving a speech or a talk or whatever in that pavilion. We do have speakers out there.
And I do understand the concern of the surrounding homes being, what if you had a concert, a wedding with a band that was held at the pavilion/amphitheater, it getting loud? I completely understand that. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud about what's the feasibility of limiting the decibels to the inside and not allowing outdoor amplification and music. Not allowing outdoor amplification in the pavilion.
Would just doing a decibel at the property line work? No, I don't really care where it's inside or outside.
Yeah.
You know,
Property line
music's
makes the
coming
most
from.
sense.
Properly.
A couple of things. The code right now allows amplified sound that impacts residential life during these hours. I'll just refer to it, up to 55 decibels, which is conversation. And that's measured at the nearest residential property. Or not nearest, any residential property. So you just got to make sure that by the time it gets to that across the street or behind you, it's 55 decibels or less that it drops off. So you could amplify it, and there are some ways you can do it so that people in this room could hear it, but people in the parking lot could not.
Got it.
Yeah. And
But-
we're okay
but
with
still
amending
be
it to 55.
outdoors.
I'm okay with that.
55?
I am not a sound expert. I have no idea what 55 decibels
Unfortunately, I
means.
became one.
So, yeah, I would think before we put something in stone, we would want to know with more certainty what
Yeah.
that means.
The one, and they would have that today. They would have that today
Regardless.
without a use permit.
They would have 55 today without a use permit.
Correct.
Do you have a sense of what 55 is? Is that attainable for what
Yeah,
you
I
want to do?
do. I don't know if any of you guys have ever lived in a condominium building, whatever. You hear about noise complaints, et cetera. Code is this. At 45, that's what they say is in the code book. So 45, and that's where this number comes from. No sound can be higher than that. But when tested, when measured, that number becomes 55 because there's leakage through everything from outlets to windows to doors, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want to get too technical about it, which is why I'm saying if it makes sense that we just follow your own code, let's just follow your code and say it's 55. That if we are bouncing sound outside of this facility, either from the pavilion or from inside that impacts the neighbor's property at 55, above 55, we get it. We got two chances.
Is
So
our code
insert,
55
the
or
staff has inserted like two complaints and
These hours.
you could yank our permit. So
Well, I don't know that we could be more restrictive than the golf course, for example. If they have, I mean, if our code is 55, then it makes sense that we should follow suit with whatever the standard code is.
I agree.
Right.
Yep, okay. So, what other questions do you have? The one thing I would say back to your traffic is if on condition E, if we just said, we're not going to wait for the complaints. If you've got more than 100 people there, you need off-duty police officer.
you're fine.
Well, I travel that road every day, 5 days a week for school. There should be officers there already.
Okay.
Like it's really bad. So I don't,
I would agree with that because one of those points of ingress or egress is pretty close to that, to
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
main road there. To
That's why I
Farm Mill,
asked.
right?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
could let them come in that way maybe, but you had to exit further
That's-
down.
that's
But
right.
then you get into left-hand turns and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Are you planning on having security or traffic help around events?
We've put it on, yes, the answer is, for large events, we'll end up having probably the local police that officers that are off duty there to help us guide that. We've done it already, even at the Little White Church. We've had events that have required that.
Sure.
We've put it on Gracious Gatherings that they are responsible for. They have a wedding that has 300 or they have a court meeting, then they have to work with Milton to figure out what they need, and they're to do it.
Yep.
So the answer is yes. It depends on the event.
Sure.
I mean, if the Girl Scouts are there with a few cars or whatever, I'll remind all that while we can have 300 people sitting there, we have 144 parking spaces. We're gonna have 144 cars. We're not going above that because we don't have any more than 144 cars.
Sure.
That's it. So we're not talking about 300 cars. We're talking about 144 that can get on this property and try to get out of there at any point in time, whether it's a concert inside or our worship service or a wedding.
Okay.
We've seen some creative ways around that, where they park somewhere else and they, bus them in and shuttle them in and all that.
Which we
So
have done.
I appreciate the 140, because I guess it's supposed to have 200, that was what it's built for, but then we brought it down to 144 in 2020.
Well, that was for the church, and that was based upon the largest assembly area, which is the large Great Hall. And that created that 200 number. But the actual rural event facility is a lesser requirement. It's one parking space per 2.5. So that's actually 120, which is less than what they have. And then I would also argue with the Gracious Gatherings, when somebody hires them and pays to use the church for, let's say, a wedding, I would say a lot of people probably come in couples, as well as a lot of people come via Uber or Lyft to come to a facility, an event, to make sure they can get home safely.
Right.
So,
That 300 is just the people attending. That doesn't account for any of the workers, any of the servers, anything else. So
Correct.
probably another, I don't know, I'm not an event person, but probably 20 to 30. So that'd be another 10 or so,
Yeah.
20 spaces.
So where are we on the?
Yep.
Decibels.
Any other questions? So here's what the notes I have on the conditions. One would be 1B, and does it work to say, rather than adjacent outdoor amphitheater, just say adjacent outdoor area?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I just don't like the reference to amphitheater when they don't have an
I
amphitheater
agree.
use permit.
I would agree with that.
And then on.
We're okay with that.
And then down on 2D, rather than outdoor amplification, it's amplified or other sounds shall not register in excess of 55 decibel points at any residential property line. And that, here's going to be the challenge for that, though. The people live in Roswell, they're going to send the Roswell police, and the noise is coming from Milton. So we have to work that out too. Because Roswell police aren't going to enforce Milton's sound ordinance. Okay. But in reality, we're just taking them back to the 55 decibels that I think Roswell probably has as well. So again, in the conclusion, the reference instead of amphitheater outdoor area. And then are we comfortable with the idea that in E, it's just the applicant shall retain off-duty police officers to manage traffic into and out of the property for every event that is expected to generate more than, is 100 the right number?
I'm good with that.
And then is it officers, or if it's right at 100, one might be able to handle it?
Well, and also, is there a difference in traffic between weekend? I don't ever travel, or I rarely travel there weekends, so I don't know the traffic pattern there. But do we think officers are needed on weekends as well?
Well, if it happens to be at the same time that the kids are letting out from the Legends Bar, yeah. Yeah.
So just to clarify for E, we're basically just deleting the first sentence and starting with the applicant shall retain and the remainder.
And then off-duty,
Right, to have retain
yeah,
off-duty.
it
the
doesn't
rest of-
necessarily have to be two, one or more police officers.
Given our plans for that intersection, I'm wondering if we should put a stipulation in that says to be reevaluated if and when that modification is made, so that you're not stuck having to do that when there's no need for it.
And we participated in that, and we did our full traffic study and submitted it. It was part of the original piece of this. And then when that whole improvement came along, we spent a lot of time working with the city and the county and Roswell, all that, to figure out how that was all going to work. And so a lot of the cones you see out there now, because we eliminated an entrance into the little white church to accommodate moving it further away from the intersection of Cox and Arnold Mill for that very reason.
Could we put a condition that said, if and when intersection improvements might be made at Arnold, Milton, and Cox, that administrative staff can determine if that condition is still necessary?
I think if there's a change in conditions out there, then come back and do a change.
Okay.
If they find they don't need it and they would like to come back and ask for some relief, then they can come and ask for
They
that
just
relief.
file for relief.
A condition amendment, yeah,
Condition relief, okay, so we don't have to put the,
correct.
okay. Let the minutes reflect, though, that we've thought that might be reasonable.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you all see we need to? Would anyone like to attempt to?
I would
make
like
a
to make some
motion?
comments. I'm not sure
Okay,
if I
go
could make
comments.
the motion. So I hear the heart in what you're trying to do. And I think overwhelmingly, Milton could use more facilities like you've created. I know Lockwood, they do great work. The facility looks beautiful. I drive by it all the time. I would definitely like to come in and take a look at it.
Please do.
I think I would be a customer because we're always looking for places to do things like that. Quiet events. I think I would have a different feeling if I were the neighbor. And so if I were a neighbor concerned about, all of the concerns would be concerning to me, especially when I look at the proximity on the map to these houses. So I love the benevolent kind of attitude and desire to serve and create community space. I think the thing that runs through my head all through this whole thing is, at some point you won't be the owner of that property. And so we have to do, the hard part we're sitting here doing is trying to figure out what happens when you're done with it. And we don't want Def Leppard, they'll be gone, but whoever's next, we don't want them playing for the neighbors. So yeah, I don't know.
You want me
I
to
don't think I
try?
have anything else. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Any other questions, comments before I put it to motion? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I would like to recommend approval of use permit U25-01 with the staff recommended conditions with the following changes. In 1B, to strike amphitheater and replace it with area. In 2D, to strike outdoor amplification and music allowable sounds and replace that with amplified or other sounds shall not register in excess of 55 decibels at the 2 time periods. In condition E, to strike the lead-in words, if more than 2 complaints are received within a 12-month period related to the event traffic, to start, the applicant shall retain 1 or more off-duty police officers to manage traffic, and then continued.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
So that was 4-1. Okay, that concludes our discussion of the use permit for Arnold Mill. We'll take a few second breather if anybody does not care to stay for the excitement of text amendments to the Unified Development Code. Yes.
I'm good. Thank you.
Just want water? Fred, you want water?
I've got one. Thank you.
Okay.
I think that was a good compromise.
My mind pushing to, especially when I heard it wouldn't be controlled by the church. Yeah.
I'm just-
Oh, yeah, we got Charlie coming in, like bands, band comes in.
Okay.
This is now,
We
this is
need.
now, not.
We need more places like that.
Well, because there is.
Let it sit in the wedding event. Okay. Next up are the text amendments to the Unified Development Code. Do you want to do these all together and then to present them all together and then we'll vote on them one at a time?
We have only one, RZ 2501.
Oh, okay. You have RZ 2501. There's also,
Yep.
Robin has some more.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. So I need to recuse myself from this conversation. I've got a conflict of interest on that property.
Okay. We need to wait for Brian to come back to reestablish quorum.
No, 100.
Okay.
100 parcel, 500 acres. You're right.
He's going to,
It is attorney-client privilege going on.
If I don't recuse. For what it's worth, I don't have like a huge opinion about this change. Yeah. Well, I would actually be a shareholder.
okay. We still have quorum, so. Okay, are we ready? I'd like to call RZ 2501.
Good evening, Planning Commissioner Shubha Jangam, Principal Planner at the city. Today, we are seeking Planning Commissioner's recommendation for the proposed Arnold Mill Road Hamlet overlay. And as you can see, it's mouthful, so I'm gonna, please allow me to call it AMR Hamlet or just a Hamlet overlay for this presentation. So as you know, we have concluded our concept phase for the project and now considering an overlay for the two nodes that were identified in the small area plan. In January, we held a community zoning information meeting, aka CZIM. 10 people attended this meeting. Staff answered all the questions. The feedback that was received during this meeting was fairly positive. We also gave the planning commissioners a preview of the overlay at the joint meeting that we had at Design Review Board in February. And in that meeting, you guys asked us about the signage in the overlay, and we have analyzed the signage options, and today we're going to report on it. However, it is going to, it will require its own public hearing should we decide to add the signage into the Hamlet overlay. I'm pleased to bring you all the work that we have done so far. The standards that we have selected for the overlay are based on what the community envisioned for those nodes. And so Caleb's going to take over the presentation, but ask us any questions, stop us in the presentation anytime. It's going to be a comprehensive overview from the beginning, so it will cover everything. But yeah.
Okay. One of the questions before we get started that I have had phone calls on has to do with the lines saying what or who decided where the nodes would be divided. In other words, if he has a farm here of 16 acres, I have a farm over here with 12, and I'm in the node. So I have to, no matter if they're close or not, I have to live by this regulation. He's on the other side, doesn't have to, and he sells his property for subdivision. And
You okay?
he could sell his, I can sell my and not be affected. If he sells his, he has to, or the developer has to meet all of these requirements. My question, and the question that I've been asked is how was the line drawn and who made it?
Who made the red box?
So
Right.
to give you
Who made the red box?
Right.
So to give you a little bit of history, in 2014, we had a visioning study, and in that visioning study, there was just a circle. Like these 2 points, we're going to have, we envisioned the nodes. But during this project, we actually sat with the community and confirmed that are these the two locations we want to have the nodes. And we have only selected properties that front the Honor Mill Road, very close to the intersection of Cox Road and Honor Mill Road. And the north portion was, there is no intersection there, but, the cluster of parcels that are selected over there, they all have, they already C1 or R1 type of zoned property. So based on that, we have kind of selected those parcels. Now we haven't proposed any changes to the zoning, base zoning, or the density. So,
Right.
So it's not that they're going to have it. The only changes we have are the standards for design and site planning. So it's not that we are putting anybody into trouble by getting them into node or leaving somebody outside the node. All the standards that are selected for the overlay are for the building design and the site design.
Yeah, good question, because if you look at their one parcel that attaches to New Providence Road,
Correct.
that's not really close to Arnold Mill.
It is not.
And so that would give them access to possibly come right through there to connect to New Providence Road. I don't know it seems like that's the value, not necessarily being in the, that's nowhere near the hamlet. You're going down Arnold Mill Road, that's nowhere near that
It is.
intersection, so why would that one be included?
So
Again, the concern is you're just gaining access to New Providence Road, which is just gonna cause more headaches.
Well, the only reason that parcel and a couple of other parcels, they were actually owned by the same person, so we had included them. And the parcel that's actually fronting the New Providence Road was considered because it is part of the concept that we created, and the concept we created had a little bit of traffic relief with that connection to the New Providence from Honor Mill Road. So that was we thought we were actually creating something, with the community's input, of course, but that concept was to mitigate some of the traffic related issues. At the same time, have more connectivities at the node.
Okay, because also during the whole project, there was also a connection up near the landfill to go over to New Providence Road too. So that was there also during the development phase, that when we met at the church, as a matter of fact. There was a road connecting Arnold Mill to New Providence up at that point, right along the southern part of the landfill.
Okay, so you're talking about that power easement. I think we had looked at that concept connection, but it was determined that it's not enough value to propose that connection yet.
Right. So again, I'm not a fan of providing that connection to New Providence Road with really no work, no discussion, no anything. So I don't, that concerns me.
Okay.
Do you know if were property owners involved in these discussions and being added to the node? Or was this?
Yes, I have sent them letters every stage of the process.
Okay.
They were invited to the meetings.
Okay.
One other note that I read in the Appin paper last week that Roswell, and I had a hard time visualizing Roswell going that far up, but that they have a new subdivision across from the Chadwick Road of 170 homes. Are we aware of that?
Yeah, Robert, is that yes?
Yes, we actually were working, the City of Roswell Planning Department asked for some information with the development across the street. And you are correct that, and I also read that the city council was considering that they would add more homes to that subdivision. So yes, it means more homes coming onto Arnold Mill.
Right. Well, I just wondered how that would affect our node.
The nodes
Yeah.
are going to need people to, activate. So that's, I mean, I understand that we want to keep it rural, but the whole purpose of the node is to give people some activities over there so that, it's not just residents. Some amenities are provided at the node so that people can have a livable lifestyle, enjoyable lifestyle.
But are we, maybe this is just me, but we set these, but we haven't really determined what we really want this to look like before we set these nodes.
Isn't that what this
kind of have
is?
that.
Is the design standards for it, like how wide the road should be and how
Yeah,
pretty?
but I meant more of,
Aesthetics or?
do we want homes or do we want more
Land use.
retail? I'm not comfortable with not knowing, our vision of having, homes and retail or intermingled, which scares me because that's what we got at 9. I just worried about not knowing what our vision is here.
Commissioner Fred, I think you probably missed the concept plans, and we're going to go over that to show you what actually, when we had public meetings, that's a concept, that's a vision we had designed for the nodes, and we can show you today, and then you can give us your feedback.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, but one more. So that parcel on New Providence Road, does that open that up for commercial? Does that open that up for different zoning uses now, saying, well, it's part of the hamlet and the hamlet's here and we can extend this? Because that would be a travesty if that got to be commercial in any way, shape, or form.
So we haven't changed anybody's zoning. If they decide to come up with a plan, including that parcel, we will definitely compare it to the concept that we are going to adopt. And because we're going to have, even if they asked for mixed use zoning to fulfill that, their whatever proposal, the entire cluster of parcels are not going to be zoned mixed use. I mean, they're all not open for commercial, just part of it will be open for commercial development. Now, I can't really predict the future.
Right, and that's what's scary. Nobody can. That's what's scary, because again, if that piece, which isn't really close to Arnold Mill in any way, shape, or form,
Right.
is now being governed by what we want on Arnold Mill, that doesn't seem appropriate.
So whenever we have rezoning, as Robin did today, she always have what is in the future land use map, what is in the zoning map, what is in other adopted plans. So we always have some reference points to make that decision, should we rezone them or not. So we will have that opportunity.
Because like you said, we had circles, I think, in the 2040 plan.
Yes, yes.
It was not nearly this big. It seems to have expanded quite a bit. And again, I'm very concerned about that parcel there specifically, because it's not close.
And what about the ones just to the south, the two beneath it?
That point, here's that point.
Is there any way for you to point on the overhead screen so other people?
This
see
one,
what we're
which
pointing
one?
at?
Yeah, those.
Which one?
neighborhood.
Well, there's, point to the one that's along New Providence.
This one, right?
That one.
Yeah.
It said you can do this all for this property now.
And then I think they're talking about, which one, what other ones, Brian, are you asking about?
Two parcels.
We're trying to get it so that people online can follow too.
Yeah. The ones the two to the south are the one that
The two
Commissioner
to
Nolte
this, yeah,
is concerned.
the two just south of that.
That do not front Arnold Mill Road.
Right, right. They are
Well-
actually owned by the same person who owns these. That's why they were.
So the same person owns these two, these four.
Yeah, the person that owns this, and the person that owns this owns that.
And this one, these two
That
are
doesn't
owned
move
by
any closer
city.
to Arnold Mill, though.
Yeah.
Well,
Still separate
his front
parcels,
property,
Yeah, there's.
his frontage is at least on Arnold Mill.
So
His frontage is on Arnold Mill.
I have a bunch of questions, but in terms of making decisions, I'm going to recuse myself out of decisions just because I'm connected.
Is that-
You hear that?
If you are going to recuse, and you would need to,
Do I step out?
you can step down.
You
and
can,
use
Out
the
there?
you can sit in
Okay.
the audience and
Yeah,
listen.
that's great.
Right.
So what's that?
That's one plan. That could be straight across. Another ranchette.
So just for
Yeah.
clarification, Shuba, with the arrow, where your arrow is now, the person that owns that property that fronts Arnold Mill owns the lot north
So
of
this
it?
this property is owned by the city. This property is owned by the city. The person who owns this also owns this property, and the person who owns this also owns this property.
And then who owns that? She's asking.
That one is separate. That one is separate.
Yeah, no, again,
But I have always invited him to the meeting.
Okay. Yeah, because that seems to have more in common with New Providence Road than it does in Arnold Mill in a big way. So that's a real concern. Because then I could see coming back, so, well, it's part of the overlay now, so we want to, do this and this and this.
I agree with that as
think
well.
That
I agree
has
with
no
that.
business being in there.
Yeah.
We're off to a good start.
Well, I would like to, if I may, go through the presentation. I do think you've raised several points, Shuba, that may be very appropriate to actually put in the text of the master plan. As you know, the master plan will be adopted by reference into the comp plan and can be used to guide zoning decisions. So I would recommend that any of the kind of concerns you have that are more guidance for the city council and guidance for future planning decisions could be put in that document to further refine what we're about to talk about this evening. So what I wanted to do today is really talk about three items. First, we wanted to update the master plan, especially for those who may be watching at home and are not familiar with it. We then wanted to give an overview of the proposed overlay zoning ordinance for the Arnold Mill Road area. And then we have a couple of questions, both for you and I'm sure for us, that we'd like to talk about. So in terms of the master plan, the city of Milton retained my firm, TSW, several months ago to develop a small area plan for the Arnold Mill Road corridor, keeping in mind a desire to really preserve the rural character of the city of Milton, especially on this important gateway to the city. We put together a team of planners, landscape architect, designers, city staff, and stakeholders, and worked with the community to come up with the vision for the plan that I'm about to talk about and the code that supports that particular plan. Had a public kickoff early last year, a community workshop where we brought together residents, businesses, and property owners to hear issues of density, issues of design, issues of the use of property. We then had a series of open houses that resulted in a draft plan. And now we're at the point where we actually begin to codify the plan and put together the regulations that will implement it, the adoption phase. As you're aware, there was a CZIM held earlier this year on the ordinance. And then as Shuba mentioned, we had a really good work session with this body and the DRB that got us to where we are this evening. So the master plan has three key types of recommendations: transportation, which really seek to relieve traffic congestion on Arnold Mill Road, both existing and proposed, and do that in a way that preserves the rural character of the corridor. This idea of activity nodes is the second major outcome. Idea of taking what are really, I would argue, two naturally occurring activity nodes identified in the comp plan and further refining the vision for what that means, what they look like, and how we might want to regulate development in there. And then finally, the final piece of it was thinking about the design, thinking about things like landscaping, building architecture, and all of the other elements of preserving the rural character. Now, quite a bit of effort went into thinking about the actual design of the roadway itself. Now, as we all know, this is a GDOT road. The state has jurisdiction over it. But one of the outcomes of the process was for the city of Milton to proactively define a vision for what they would like Arnold Mill Road to be. This is really based on some precedent over in Alpharetta, where Alpharetta conducted a similar process of State Route 9, and we're actually able to use that effort to guide DOT when DOT decided that they wanted to widen the roadway. So the vision for the corridor really created a series of cross sections that seek to preserve the rural character of the corridor if and when the road is widened. It looks at creating a treed median with multi-use trails, pedestrian paths, and a lot of landscaping along the entire corridor. Again, we don't know if GDOT will ever proceed with a project here, but what this does is it gives the city a very strong basis to say to GDOT, this is our vision for the corridor, work with us, help us achieve this, rather than what you may otherwise wish to do as the state. There was also, oh, yes, sir?
Now, since we're probably, Lord knows how far on GDOT.
Yep.
When this would go through, let's say a developer comes in the next few months and wants to develop the property that this is going to be. How do you look at what it looks like now and then this?
Yep. One of the proposed standards in the zoning ordinance is actually to measure the rural viewshed and measure the setbacks from the proposed right-of-way. So that is not at all uncommon. It's very common where the state is going to be widening a roadway. And so the code actually talks about that.
So it takes that into.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Another very important part of the master plan, as Shuba just mentioned, was looking at the two activity nodes. We've talked a lot about Cox Road this evening, both with the Rural Event Center and now the previous discussion. There was a series of concepts done for this area. One looked at what could be developed under traditional sort of AG1 zoning with a 60-foot rural viewshed, fairly typical of what you would see in much of the developing areas of Milton, a bunch of 1-acre lots spread across the landscape, not as much open space preservation, and just fairly conventional development pattern. We then looked at a second alternative, which anticipated, well, what could we do to make this area feel more rural? So this particular concept looked at a much wider rural view shed along Arnold Mill Road, pushing the houses back even further. Internal to the development, the concept would bring the houses closer together, closer to the street, and allow the property owners to preserve more of the particular residential lots as undeveloped. The other thing this concept did is it created the connectivity that we just talked about. It created internal connectivity both among the disparate property owners and then potentially over to New Providence Road if that portion is ever developed. And then finally, it did anticipate a small amount of commercial, about 15,000 square feet, right at the intersection of Cox Road. Again, this is completely illustrative, and as you'll see in a moment, we're not recommending any changes to the zoning. So this is a vision. This is what may happen. And I do think, as I said before, if the Planning Commission would like more policy guidance on what that means in the master plan, I think that's a very appropriate modification to it. We then looked at the Chadwick Road activity area. As you know, there is already some commercial development going on up here. Portions of this area are already zoned C1. The vision for this area includes really reflecting the recent development plans that were approved with about an 8,000 square foot of commercial village. It looks at potentially developing a sort of cottage inn or country inn and cottage area adjacent to the river. And then again, long-term reflecting that the landfill has a tremendous opportunity to one day be a public park and a really amenity for that particular area. So from that master plan, which was prepared by my colleagues, I then came on board to help codify it. And so what I wanted to do now was talk about the actual zoning regulations, the amendments to the UDO that would support that vision that we talked about. Now, a couple of really high-level ideas. The first thing is that we strived in this code update to really focus on the minimal elements of achieving that vision, while recognizing that there are a lot of unknowns. We don't know what properties will actually be in play. So we tried to come up with as much as we could with the vision, building in some flexibility. And what we've recommended is to create a new overlay district, very similar in theory to the overlay district that you already have at Birmingham. This would be an overlay sub-district within the larger rural Milton overlay that would focus only on the two Arnold Mill Road nodes, so the Cox Road and the Chadwick node. Now, in order to do that, and in order to not compromise the order of your UDO, we would have to create a new section 6.5 that would be the overlay, and then move the historic preservation back from 6.5 to 6.6. Entirely a numeric change, but it is a change. And then the standards, as I mentioned, would focus on the physical elements, so the layout of property, the connectivity, and the design of buildings, streetscapes, and transportation. It would not focus on changing the permitted uses on the property. It would not focus on increasing density. So everything that we've anticipated would acknowledge the fact that the city will not be extending utility sewers to this area, and it is all density neutral. So we assume that the underlying zoning of AG1 would remain, and that property owners in the future would have the legal right to request rezoning, but the city's larger plan for considering text map changes and comp plan amendments would certainly be ongoing discussion. So in terms of the boundary, as we've talked about, we focused on the two nodes. Chadwick, the northern node, is zoned C1, AG1, and then R2A. So again, it's sort of a cluster within the larger AG1 in this part of the city of Milton. And then the Cox Road is entirely zoned AG1 today.
So it seems like, if we go back to the one before that, it seems like that's where we've made the change. Go one more. If you look at along Arnold Mill around New Providence, it doesn't show those properties in there. But now all of a sudden we jump to this one where it does show those properties in there. Now, if you go to the next one, the properties are clearly included in the next one. And again, I don't know how that happens.
Yeah, that'll be a question for staff to answer, but there is a slight discrepancy between the Arnold Mill Road character area and the drawing that was eventually drawn for the concept plan. And Shuba would have to answer why that occurred. I came in later in the process,
Understood.
unfortunately. Now, what is in the code, as Mr. Edwards asked about, is the codification of the roadway vision. And so what we have recommended is that even though applicants can certainly not implement a road widening in front of their property, the vision for the roadway is in fact in the code, and there is a requirement that the appropriate section and right-of-way be reserved at the frontage of the property. Additionally, there is a modification to the rural viewshed that would be unique to the Arnold Mill Road corridor. We have recommended increasing it from the current 60 feet to 100 feet for residential uses. That was an item that had a lot of discussion with the public and determined that if you're going to preserve the rural nature of the corridor, it's important to have a bit more buffer. Now, where there are commercial uses today, including at the north end and potentially getting down the road at the Cox Road node, we did acknowledge that visibility may be important, and so there is a slightly reduced setback of 40 feet within those particular areas. So the roadway is in the ordinance. And then there was another section in the ordinance that talks about the areas that are not within the commercial nodes. The proposed overlay also considers a bunch of other standards. It talks about streetscapes. We've coordinated with your public works officials to come up with standards for the design of roadways, the design of sidewalks, the landscaping and trees along them, the provisions for walkways between uses and to adjacent properties. We've developed outdoor lighting standards that are very similar to the ones that Milton uses today, both in portions of Crabapple and then portions of Deerfield. We have carried forth your buffer requirements. So if anything in these nodes abuts AG1 property, there would be buffers. We've carried forth screening requirements that are sort of general good design standards, fencing standards prohibiting barbed wire fencing, and of course, this idea that parking would be to the side or the rear. Now, one of the big changes, however, is in the treatment of some of the zoning district standards. So I mentioned before that we are not changing the underlying zoning. Properties that are zoned AG1 will remain AG1. Properties that are zoned C1 would remain C1. But you may recall that the concept plans do talk about making the development a bit more compact. And so in order to encourage that, we have made a couple of recommended modifications that would only apply in these areas to the underlying AG1 zoning. They would be completely optional, so property owners would not be compelled to follow them, but they would be incentives to encourage the greater open space preservation. The first change is that we have reduced the lot width in AG1 to 100-foot minimum, 120-foot maximum. Again, making better use of the space. But all other standards related to lot size and width would be per the AG1 zoning. So 1 acre, maximum lot coverage, all that stuff remains entirely the same. We did make a couple of modifications as well, internal to the developments related to lot setbacks. We have proposed a 40-foot setback with a reduction of porches in that particular setback. We have proposed a fairly significant reduction in the side yard setback. Again, this is only internal to the development. The reason we did that is we've made the lots a bit narrower, and we wanted to give applicants the flexibility to still be able to have as much buildable area without, with acknowledging that the properties are going to be a bit narrower. When you do the math, it doesn't work out. Yes, sir?
Again, hate to interrupt, but on the narrow layout, we've been trying in a lot of our meetings to move away from narrow properties for developers not to come in and be using narrow. Should we be promoting that, or?
Well, again, that's a policy decision for the board to make. This is entirely based on the idea of being able to make narrower lots along the street so we can preserve more open space along the rural viewshed and then in the backs of the property. So that's why it was put into place. That's why we've proposed it. But if that is a policy direction that either the commission or the city council doesn't want to go, I mean, we by all means would respect that. But the idea is to grant a little bit more flexibility in these compact walkable nodes in order to preserve the open space within them.
Yeah, because if I'm looking at this, the rear yard, which is usually 50 feet, here is on the narrow lots, 100 feet.
It's 100.
That idea that,
And then, as Ms. Bird just mentioned, we have recommended an increase in the rear yard to 100 feet along the rural view shed, which would be a new standard. But then everything else in AG1 is the same. And then the graphic at right just shows you sort of what is the potential implications on buildable areas of the lot. The image on the left is the proposed hamlet standard with the reduction. You can see that a 1 acre lot would have about 20,700 square feet of buildable area when you do the math. The maximum lot size of lot width of 1,220 feet wide would also get you about 20,000, a little bit less. And then the typical AG1, which is 150 foot wide, would get you about 18,000. So again, we're giving the property owner the option to do this. It is by no means a mandate, but they do have a little bit more flexibility in terms of being able to lay out the site. The other thing that we haven't mentioned here is that this also does have a very significant incentive for tree preservation. The tree ordinance will continue to apply. Nothing changes there. But by allowing the property owners to potentially use more of the side yard, they can adjust to avoid impacting trees. They can adjust where the building sits. So the other standards are, there is a 10-foot setback internal to streets within the development. There is a separation of buildings of 10 feet, again, internal within the development. This would really only potentially apply to a site that might one day be zoned for something that allowed commercial. That separation would really only apply there, but everything else would be for the underlying zoning. And then in terms of building design, we have incorporated a lot of the design aspects that are already found in the Birmingham Crossroads, but have made some updates for the particular architectural character of the corridor. This was an area where we worked very closely with the city architect on some of the design attributes, updated it based on public input, and then obviously updated it based on your feedback at the DRB work session. We have proposed to require buildings to be one of 5 architectural styles. Again, these are already in rural Milton today, but we've added a few adjustments: Colonial Revival, Craftsman, Greek Revival, Queen Anne, Folk Victorian, and Vernacular. Again, so no great surprise. These are fairly endemic to recent development in Milton. But we have made a couple of changes to the building architectural section based on your feedback and guidance from staff. The first thing that we talked about at our previous meeting was this issue of porch dining and enclosures. And there was some concern about, if these properties ever ended up being zoned commercial, so a very, very hypothetical, what would happen if someone tried to enclose a porch for outdoor dining purposes? And I think this is the property in Birmingham that was being referenced. So anyway, staff showed us what you as a planning commission and what DRB generally likes to see. And we have actually proposed to codify that particular standard in this overlay. And so there are a couple of things that are in here. If you've looked at it, there's a whole new section that talks about porch standards that prohibits permanent enclosures. So you can have a roof, but you cannot have permanent 365-day enclosures of the side. That does not become a porch. That becomes interior space and would be prohibited. But we've put standards for fabric, curtains, and awnings that are rigid awnings all year round. Again, there are specifics. I'm not going to go into this, but we saw that you're very interested in the paneled system versus the hanging plastic system and have codified that. The other thing that we've done is we have recommended a duration limit in terms of when these can be up. So we've recommended only allowing the curtain structures from December 1st to March 1st. Again, this was my interpretation of when the weather is good in North Georgia to not good, I should say, to have outdoor curtains, but this is something that certainly is open for a particular discussion. And so those are sort of the changes that we've made. Now, we do have a couple of areas where we'd like to ask you some questions, and I'm going to ask those, if I may, and then we can go into full discussion. So the first issue that came up relates to how this overlay should interact with the underlying zoning and the rural Milton standards. As initially drafted, I wrote that the more restrictive standards should apply. That is something that is pretty common in all of your overlays today. So it says that if there's something in rural Milton that is more strict than something in the Arnold Mill Road corridor, the more strict of the two applies. However, there was a suggestion that perhaps we allow the applicant to choose. And so there are really two considerations for you this evening, two identified considerations that you may or may not have an opinion on. Should, in your opinion, the more restrictive standard apply? Or should the applicant be able to choose? Or perhaps there's another option that you would like us to consider as part of that?
Let me jump in on that last comment.
Yes.
Just say in terms of another option, a common reference, and oftentimes with an overlay, is to say that the overlay will prevail, in that we understand that the regular district may be more restrictive, but we want a consistent look or interpretation throughout this overlay. So if there is a conflict, the overlay will prevail. I mean, you could write it, the overlay will prevail, the underlying will prevail, the more strict will prevail, or the new option as to the choice.
But whatever prevails, they could still come back and get an exclusion or some way around that, correct? I mean, if we said, rural and it's more stringent, but somebody comes and says, well, no, I want this one because it fits look and feel, they could come back and get an exception or
Propose
something like that, couldn't they?
anything aside from maybe density or other use, but any of those
Right.
standards, they could come back and get, whether it's a variance or a warrant, I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I don't,
where- some sort of exception could be requested.
So for example, like if one of these is the temporary enclosure of the porch and we say it's from this date to this date, they could come and ask for a variance to make it a different date?
Yes.
And that would go to the BZA? Okay.
And I think that a lot of the conflict, if it is conflict, is going to be in the architectural design standards. I know when we talked with Bob, he asked us to clarify a couple of things that could be clear in the rural Milton. And so we've done that in this ordinance. For example, there's a minimum porch depth so that people don't just tack on porches. And there's a couple of minor architectural updates that he felt would strengthen the ability of the city to regulate architectural design. So if we allowed the applicant to pick or choose, they would probably choose the more lenient one, just
Right.
knowing
I
how
think
things go.
If you were asking for input, which I think you were, I think I would always defer to the more restrictive one. Again, I think that's better for Milton as a whole, especially, but assuming there are ways to make it fit likewise, assuming there's ways to get a variance. In other words, let's not set this up for the exception, let's set this up for the rule and have a route for the exception to be withheld. That would be my 2 cents.
And my first reaction, not having delved into it a lot, is this idea that we're trying to make, especially if this is a well-traveled corridor, that we want people to know they're in Milton. And so for uniformity's sake, I'd be more like the rural Milton overlay applies. If there's a conflict, then the rural Milton overlay applies, just so we have some consistency
Absolutely.
along the
I
road.
totally agree.
Agree?
Did you need a vote on that or just
He's
input?
just taking a.
So if I could make a comment, I think that I would agree with that in the sense that I think that these regulations really just apply more to the two nodes than up and down
Yeah.
the corridor. So it's not like we're requesting that everything between, this node and whatever further north has to have 100-foot. That's not what we're saying. It's just in this node that you have to have the 100-foot. So reality is, if somebody wants to develop a subdivision or have a house along that's north of this node, the southern node, the Cox Road node, they're just going to do whatever the rural Milton says anyway. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is truly only impacting the nodes from a perspective of a different development pattern, if that makes sense.
And as I'm looking at this and hearing that, I mean, the question is the lot width going to be one of the standards where there may be a conflict? And if we're saying, that seems like one of the big issues here, if we're saying the rural Milton is going to apply, then I'm wondering if we're
Yeah.
not achieving.
I would argue, again, with all due respect, the rural Milton, we've, as we wrote this, we sort of assumed that that was the bare minimum. So everything we've done has respected 90% of the intent of that. But where we had differences, like the streetscape, like the rural viewshed, we've made changes as a deliberate effort to create a certain character on Arnold Mill Road. And I worry that if the rural Milton applied, then we basically don't even need the overlay.
That was kind of the sense that I was.
So do you need more input from us, or do we know what to do with this language? Right. But I guess, is there a question of not only the hamlet, but the whole strip? Or is it, this is
No,
just
this is
talking about
only
the
for the
hamlet?
hamlet.
It's only
It's
for the
just about the
hamlet.
hamlets, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, so I
Although the
think the
architecture would
consensus is,
also
I got, long day. The consensus is, we want the hamlet standards to apply.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You don't get to pick and choose, it's not the least restrictive, it's the hamlet standards. Unless the hamlet standards are silent, and then the rural Milton overlay
Okay.
applies.
You will probably want to make a note of that for your eventual motion on your recommendation. 'Cause I believe you need to make a recommendation to the
Yeah,
city
because I think
council
that's
tonight.
part of C2,
Yeah.
which what we
Yes.
just discussed is not written.
Right.
Great. So we have a new one, a C. Good. The other thing I did want to talk to you about before we break into further questions is you had asked us to look at the sign ordinance. And I read through it. I read through the entire thing to make sure that it matches the plan vision. Generally speaking, we had 3 sets of standards that were reviewed. There were the rural Milton standards, there were the underlying AG1 standards, and there were the underlying C1 standards. In addition, just took a look at Birmingham Crossroads because I thought it could probably be a fairly good surrogate for what we're talking about. So in terms of what we found, the rural Milton standards, as you can see at the right, they do have some restrictions on materials that are fairly compatible with what we would recommend per the master plan. They do not they do not permit internally illuminated signage except open close signs. And so I think that's very compatible. But other than that, they're rather quiet. And so assessment there was that they're probably not enough for these nodes. Again, assuming that they might one day have a rural event center or something like that. It's really, I think my recommendation to the city would be to have some stronger standards in that area. We also looked at the AG1 standards, as I mentioned, in terms of sign. We did feel that for the single-family uses, the AG1 standards are absolutely appropriate. You have very restrictive size standards today. They do a good job balancing the right of free speech, that is really what signed ordinances are at the end of the day, without allowing people to put up these giant glaring signs. So we felt that those were really appropriate for the single family. However, knowing that one of the properties, at least one if not two, are already zoned C1, we did feel that the standards were somewhat insufficient. They, again, had no provisions other than the material and illumination ones that we talked about previously. And then we looked at Birmingham Crossroads. Birmingham Crossroads has a lot of standards that TSW would recommend as really models for what should apply in the nodes, in our opinion. They limit the material of the sign structure to wood, brick, stone, and to the extent possible, the same material as the building. So that gives it a city architect a lot of discretion in terms of making sure that they're compatible. They also limit the face of the sign, which rural Milton does not. So you can have the structure that holds the sign, but then the actual face of the sign has to be wood or a material that looks like wood. It cannot be a plastic insert, which again, I think, going out on a limb here, but I think that's the aesthetic that we're going to. And then it does have slightly smaller standards for both wall signs and freestanding signs. But what it does that I think is most critical is that prohibition at the bottom. It doesn't allow pole signs or monument signs. So it says that if you're going to be doing signs, again, for potential commercial uses, if they ever get rezoned one day down the road, they have to be integral to the building. They can't be these giant pole signs sitting in the front yard. And so we would recommend that the city look at adopting the Birmingham standards as really a model for non-residential uses in these particular nodes. I don't think you need to spend the city's money writing a whole new sign ordinance. I think a sort of pulling those standards out would probably put you in a very good position. And so that concludes my presentation. Are there any further questions for me?
Actually, one for Robin. What was the final disposition on the size of the, because they had asked for a variance to make the signs bigger at Birmingham Crossroads than the 32 square feet. I
Oh,
think they wanted up to
they
40.
pulled it out. The application was pulled out.
Okay, so they went ahead with a 32, and I noticed the one that was bigger got replaced with the 32 so they're uniform, so that's good too. Southwest corner has the same sign, it has a new sign now, it's the same as the northeast corner.
These are very fair size standards. I've written sign ordinances for Roswell, Dunwoody, Milton, half the metro area, and these are a good balance between aesthetics and property rights in terms of size, in my opinion. Any other questions?
So the slide before us, you said that single-family residential you were good with. You felt ours were sufficient?
Yeah, you
So
have
we
very strong
residential
protections.
there, and we have commercial here, and so it looks like we've got a good combine those. We're in pretty good shape.
What you would probably do is you probably would create a new division in your sign ordinance and just, say for residential standards, see the AG1. I think that's satisfactory. And then for the non-residential standards, you can enumerate them. And luckily, staff has the source files and a beautiful Word file, so it should be relatively easy to do.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, any more questions for our consultant or staff? Do we have any public comments for this item?
Not on this item.
On this item. Open it up for further questions or discussion. Do we need to get clarification on when did the line change and why did the line change?
Or did the line change? 'Cause
Or
again,
did the line change?
yeah, I think that's one of the comments I'd like to make on that, because some places it's included, some places it isn't,
Because we have kind of the map, the one map that shows
Okay, so
something more
this is-
rectangular and the other that more zigzags.
this is the character area boundary for honor mill in our comprehensive plan. So this is where we started.
Okay.
Then, if you look over here, we had the nodes. We selected that these two locations are going to be nodes. So when we looked over here, these are the parcels. If you see, they are pretty green. They are undeveloped. So we picked those parcels to create the best possible node layout for the city. A concept, but we picked the green fields to create. We can't pick the houses, the properties that already have houses. So we didn't pick the church, obviously. We didn't pick this one over here. We picked the green fields to create the node. So that was our first step. We didn't really anticipate that we are going to add these parcels right away, but as our concept developed and it was, the consensus was built that this is acceptable, the continuity of the road is acceptable, it just felt appropriate to include these parcels as part of the node. But if you think it's wrong, we can certainly pull it back.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, I don't see where those parcels have anything in common with Arnold Mill Road. I mean, they're so removed, they don't front it. There's quite a bit of property between them and Arnold Mill Road, so I don't see what they have in common. They have a lot
Okay,
more in common.
So
with what's-
you are okay removing the one that's fronting New Providence Road? Because these two parcel owners would like to have a continuity, because anyway, they own these properties that front the honor mill, so.
Yeah, the one I'm more concerned about is one that fronts, that hits New Providence.
Okay,
That'd be
that's the one you want to remove?
That'd be the one that I don't think belongs.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, because just for clarification, two lots below that are owned by the city.
Yeah, these are
The
parts of
lots
the,
to the west, the front lot, the back lot is owned by the same person as the front lot.
yes.
And likewise, the next two front Arnold Mills, so that's not as
Yeah,
big of
so,
an issue.
so I see some commonality there. I don't see anything with, with that one. So I
Okay.
think I'd feel a lot more comfortable if that was removed. Because that doesn't prevent somebody else who's going to be buying it to developing under the same things, but it just doesn't force that on anybody. It keeps it more with the surrounding lots in that area.
Understood.
Okay?
Anything else?
No.
So that would mean if that lot along New Providence was excluded, it would fall under the rural Milton overlay
yes.
standards as opposed to the Hamlet standards, right?
Which,
Unless the owner of that property wanted to come in and make a case for something
right,
different.
they could
Yeah, it
always
is
meet that, but
Yeah.
at least
Yeah.
it's,
So what they're talking about
This
is,
parcel.
so I want to try to understand, we're talking about in this concept plan that was reviewed with the community, this would be removed. And this road just dead ends. Is that what you're saying?
No, it doesn't have to dead end.
no, it
It's-
doesn't have
Well,
to,
no,
it's
it would
just,
have to cul-de-sac because this property would not be included. That's what you're
again,
saying?
right now, different people own all those. So, I mean, it's a great concept, but, they could always do that. If somebody bought all of this, they could certainly do that. They could come in and say, okay, I want to follow this but right now, that's a whole separate piece of property, right? That's a whole separate
Well,
parcel.
no, they couldn't do this if it's not part of the overlay, because the overlay allows reduced lot sizes, which the traditional zoning does not.
It
Those
allows
look
So I just
different
want
shape.
to, I just want to be clear that what you're saying is you are looking to have this portion of the concept plan removed from the concept plan. Okay,
Correct.
all right.
But the thing is, though, is if I look at those all look like traditional lot sizes up there.
Kind of, yes.
Yeah, but,
They aren't the long and deeps,
right, but they could,
Size, but
they could be
not
though.
with the layout.
not the way this is concepted, yeah.
No, but it's, I mean,
Yeah.
okay.
So in all scenarios, your recommendation is just to remove this portion from the concept?
Correct, whatever that one lot is. I don't-
Okay. All right?
Not from, you want to remove that parcel from the overlay zone.
And the,
It can stay in the concept.
no, it
Correct.
cannot. It cannot.
Yeah, I mean,
If
from
the
the
standards don't
zoning.
apply, it wouldn't stay in the concept. It would have to be removed.
Removed in totality from
Right.
everything.
The whole thing would be removed.
But they could still make that one big development.
Sure.
It's just that the northeast corner would have different standards. You still could have the road connect.
Yes.
It would just force those lots. The way I'm looking at it, it would force those lots to be all 1 acre.
Right, but there's no requirement for connectivity if this concept plan is not what's being approved, because that's a separate parcel. So the road wouldn't necessarily have to connect to the rest of it. The rest of it could be accessed from
No problem.
the side street, and there would be no connectivity.
So I think that,
something to think
yeah,
about.
when Caleb's coworkers were creating this plan, I think that was one of the keys to having it in, was that connectivity for another alternative to be able to have a way to get from Arnold Mill to New Providence and vice versa. So
And I heard you earlier raise a concern about that, Kurt.
Yeah, that's, I mean,
About you're basically creating a cut through and that people will be using that more as a cut through than for the development.
correct. It'll be dumping, yeah, that's my concern. I don't think it's an easy, I don't think it's a,
I think it's an easy cut through down
I
to
think
the
it's a-
circle.
I think it's
Yeah.
got 4 cut throughs. The way I read this thing, it's got 4 cut throughs, right? All coming off New Providence. You got the one in the south, the one through the roundabout, the one up north. So it's got a number of curb cuts onto Arnold Mill.
And it could create a traffic on the east side of New Providence there, right where that road is cut.
Yeah,
If you have enough traffic, it might warrant a roundabout or something there, right?
right. I mean, that gives you three different avenues to check out.
Just to be clear, I heard this a couple of times. We're not changing the lot sizes to them, so none of the density is going to change lot size. The shape is what's potentially
Yeah.
going to change.
So I think the idea was, because you have, if you look at the western portion of this, there is a lot of woods. And to get it such that you could have this concept, you needed long and narrow, but that would save the woods in the back. But that doesn't really apply to the northeast. That concept all looks like traditional 120-foot wide lot to 150-foot wide lots, not as deep. And no need to protect the Arnold Mill view shed.
I'm seeing kind of what you're seeing as well. I don't make that policy decision,
Oh.
but yeah.
So with this concept plan, instead of 25, 26, 27, 28 being that, those could be 100-foot lots, correct?
No, the 120, if it's rural Milton, we increased it from 100.
Okay, but again, those could be smaller, more narrow lots there, which isn't like anything else around it except.
If they're in the.
Yeah, if they're in,
family.
right, if they're in
If
the
we put
concept
them
like
out,
they're
they
here.
need to be,
Right, I
what
mean-
is the new standard, 120?
100 to 120, but mathematically, by making them narrower, you got to make them deeper.
Right.
So I think you lose one side of the street. I mean, just mathematically. I believe, I don't have confirmation, she is not responding to my text, but I believe that all of those were conforming to the AG1 standard, the current AG1 standard when they're drawn. I think the discussion was really focused on the ones that that are through lots to Arnold Mill.
Understand, I mean,
So if you want us to remove that parcel, the concept is really going to look a little different. I mean, I don't know if we should, revise this concept for the council members and mayor. I
I mean,
mean,
what do you guys think?
it
do you
will
guys-
really look different than what we have shown them so far.
The other thought might have been they want an easier access to the park from New Providence. And they wanted to make it a cut through to the park.
There's no parking for the park or anything else, it looks like.
Yeah, well, it's just a potential park.
Mhm.
But I mean, that would, otherwise the people have to go all the way down to the fire station make that hairpin turn and come back north to get to the park.
I mean, what do you guys think? I think I made
Yeah.
my point pretty clearly. What do you guys think?
So what's the final recommendation?
I don't like the idea of the fact that this could, given how bad Arnold Mill traffic is, that I could start, I could see people using this as cut-throughs.
I agree. I
They
agree.
come down New Providence, they don't want to wait for that left turn at the fire station that takes forever. So they cut through, pick up the traffic circles so they can get the light.
Yeah, agreed.
Not that I would do that.
Yeah, but
Yeah. Or they want to go north. They're not going to cut through on Ranchette because that turn is now become impossible because there's just too much traffic.
That's right.
So they come down to here to cut, to
That's
go
right.
north because the Ranchette cut through is no longer any good because you can't get out onto 140 from it.
For what it's worth, and maybe staff can address this, but the concept isn't that the road cut through or not is just optional, and it can be developed whether it's in this node or under the rural Milton overlay. It could be a cut. I mean, it could be a access at both ends, or it may not be. It just depends on how it might be developed and how the owners of those particular parcels want to develop them.
Because it's
That's
small
true.
enough, it
We
doesn't need two ways in and out.
Well, we had
Right.
one person contacted us who wanted to buy the whole thing. So he might just, create this kind of subdivision with connectivity.
Right. But what I'm saying is, yeah, the only thing that makes this concept plan work is taking this parcel over here that has nothing to do with what we're doing over here, saying, let's just add it.
The thing is that this overlay doesn't require this concept plan. The concept plan is just, this is what might be able to be put there if this were adopted. It doesn't require that that's how this gets developed. I mean, some of those are large lots. Someone may say, hey, I'm going to keep I don't know what the size is.
But in some way, in voting yes, does that somehow mean we're endorsing the concept?
Today we are voting on the overlay district, not the concepts. We
Right.
gave you
So
this as
and this is just one interpretation of the overlay district. That interpretation could be considerably different, as I think everyone is saying here. That could be more narrow homes. That could be not 1 acre homes up there. That's just drawn here. And I've never seen one of these that has looked bad. So,
Conceptually, yeah. I'm just worried about the potential for. But like you said, like I said, actually, is even if we excluded it, there's nothing against a developer coming in and putting the cut-through roads in
Right,
because he
if
wants
right.
access to the
that's right.
commercial.
They're going to buy it all and then they'll right back to here. But putting
Yeah.
this in there kind
They're
of
building
leads it.
roads.
Leads it down that path.
Correct. It leads
Yeah,
it.
I share that concern.
So also, if I would give some input, that I think the Public Works Department, if they feel that, let's say, a developer comes in for that northern portion, that they may see this as a plan, whether it's part of this overlay or not. But if they feel like this connection between New Providence and Arnold Mill provides a public positive transportation decision, they may force the developer to have interparcel. So traditionally, the code has always talked about trying to create interparcel, but if it doesn't do any good to the public, we don't really do it. If it's just, interparcel between two developments that, connects one end of one road up, 1,000 feet, well, we're not going to require it versus, and I don't know what the position of the Public Works Department is, if they would like to see this connection between New Providence and Arnold Mill, whether this is part of the overlay or not, or it's part of the concept or not, they may be forced to do it or asked to do it to create a better transportation network for the city. if
Okay,
that makes
just-
sense.
Just so I can understand kind of if you're part of the hamlet, something you get that you don't get being outside the hamlet is you can do 100-foot wide lots that are deeper. Whereas because we revised the standard and said anywhere else, you've got to have 120, 150 feet. So this allows them, being in the hamlet gives the developer the ability to do long and narrow lots that he would not otherwise
And they
have.
could,
Which is,
they could do the whole development that way.
right, which we're
Yeah.
talking up here is really not an issue the way this is drawn.
The way this is drawn, but
and
he
again-
might draw it another way.
Exactly. They may draw, instead of having, I mean, it's not a very direct interconnect, right? You got to
Yeah.
go down and around, past the park, all that. Or they may say you just come straight across.
My gut says there's a creek there because it ends in a lake
As,
and it's got woods above it. I bet there's a creek.
floodplain there.
But still, they could say,
There's a
okay, come
floodplain.
right across, make it a direct cutout, which would be even worse, I think.
Yeah.
Well, they could, except they'd have to build a really big bridge over that floodplain,
Well,
which they may not be allowed to do, to build on a floodplain.
but they're putting homes in it.
Yeah.
But again, are we encouraging the narrow lots?
I don't
In
want
the
to
north.
encourage narrow
I
lots.
Well, here's the deal. I'm okay with it here, given the parcel sizes, because we want to maintain a lot of green space along Arnold Mill. And to do that, and, like if, for example, if you look at some of these homes, because they have the 100 feet behind them, the lots are long and narrow, but then you've got a lot of green space, including between those houses, those 4 houses.
Mhm.
That you wouldn't have if you went wider, because they'd probably put 2 streets through there rather than just 1. Yeah, if you made them wider, they'd probably put not just one, they'd put 1 street and then split so that they could get, because they don't want the density. But we want it to not look like there's houses there. We want it to look like there's woods.
Right, and we want that in the hamlet area. Do we want that same look and feel up off New Providence? I would say probably not.
Yeah.
I would do.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree. We're okay with the long and narrow along Arnold Mill.
Along Arnold Mill.
In the hamlet.
In the hamlet.
Because it keeps the green, but they're along New Providence.
I agree with that.
Given the layout of that particular parcel, where it's wide enough to put them on either side and spread them out. Yeah. I'm kind of coming around to you, Kurt.
Oh, no. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the hamlet area, absolutely. And again, I just think that's been included in the hamlet for convenience sake. Not because it makes any sense other than somebody
Yeah.
might be buying that too.
Okay, so we'll remove that parcel
Okay.
from the overlay.
Okay.
Do you want us to make changes to the concept? Or leave the concept as is?
Well, again, the concept kind of, I was saying, kind of leads them down saying, hey, here's the option that we want. What do you guys think? Should they move from the concept or included? If it's not in the hamlet, it shouldn't be in the concept. Those are kind of my thoughts, but
If we want.
if we're removing that from the hamlet,
Right.
then I don't think it should be in the hamlet concept plan.
Or it should be somehow noted that that is
Rural-
rural Milton standards, not Hamlet standards.
Yeah,
Right.
So it's
we
clear.
do that, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be easy
Yep.
to add, just to.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Good point.
Okay. Now where
Any
are
other
we?
Yeah, I was
questions?
about to say, where does that leave us in terms of the text?
Oh, you
Are
want
we
to go
ready
line by
to
line?
approve text?
Yeah,
Yes, and you went with option C2, I think is what you said. So there would need to be, the motion would need to consider making, if there's a conflict between the rural Milton overlay and the Arnold Mill Road overlay. The Arnold Mill Road overlay prevails.
So this actually says if the standards are not specified, then the standards of the Milton Overlay District apply. That stays in.
Well, so you're doing C, which isn't written down, which is what Caleb just
And
said.
if the standards are not specified there, then this section applies. If standards are specified in both, then these
The standards of this Arnold Mill.
the standards of this Arnold Mill. Anybody see anything else on all the words? I kind of went over them the last time, but does anybody have any other
I do not.
needed changes?
Not.
While you're reviewing it, I did, the version you have, the paper copy you have, it does reflect some really language cleanup provided by Mr. Fricky, and so we've highlighted
Thank you.
those in color on the document you have.
Great. Okay. So does anyone want to propose a motion on RZ 2501 reflecting the change in C2?
Okay, I move we recommend approval of RZ 25-01 as written with the addition of section C for, in section C2, make it option C that we talked about.
The standards of,
We're not going to say section C, but we're just.
Yeah.
gonna
Okay,
That was
okay,
just, it was
which-
choice C, but yeah,
Okay.
we'll fix that.
yeah, you
Oh,
have
so
to
it's-
say, you have to actually say, to strike option A
yeah.
or B and instead insert the standards of this Arnold Mill Road Hamlet overlay apply.
Yes,
That's a
Did you-
friendly amendment.
okay,
Okay.
And then are you going to amend the map?
Yeah, the map.
yes.
And amend the map.
And then amend the map.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Any discussion?
You just voted on who's gonna.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So
No.
that was 4-0 with Commissioner James recusing himself.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, we're up to, I have 10% battery left on my watch, so we better keep moving. We're calling RZ 2503 regarding public hearings and notice amendments.
Thank you, Caleb, great work, appreciate
Thank
all you're doing in the
you.
city. Same with you, Shub. Thank you.
Give us two choices, we'll choose the third.
We'll create our own, dang it.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. We have for your consideration a few text amendments this evening. And the reason we have text amendments before you is because we work with the code every day. And we occasionally find things that we feel could be improved upon. And so we bring to you for your attention and for your consideration. The first one has to do with the community zoning information meetings. Now, we advertise these meetings 10 days prior to the meeting in the Milton Herald. And the reason we do this is because the city of Milton would like to let the community know about these meetings in as many ways as possible. It's not a requirement of the state that we do this, but we do this because we want to make sure that we extend the information out to maximize community engagement and awareness. What we have found is that the ads in the Milton Herald for the CZIM meetings are really not very effective. In all of 2024, we only had one person that showed up to these meetings. Meanwhile, they take a significant amount of staff time to create the ads, and there's an expense associated with it. We looked at our cost-benefit analysis, and we found that, we do advertise these meetings on the city's website. We advertise them through social media. I guess in today's world, a lot of people use technology to find out about their information, not necessarily looking at the back of a Milton Herald. Other meetings certainly are required to be advertised by state law in the Milton Herald, and so this meeting, Planning Commission, City Council, they're all advertised in the Milton Herald. The CZIM is not required to be by state law. We only do it because we think it's another way of reaching the community and to help generate that participation. But what we find is that in practice, it doesn't really work very well. We looked at other neighboring communities and what they do, and we found that most of them don't advertise in the Milton Herald. Not these meetings, other meetings for sure, but not these meetings. Alpharetta, Sandy Springs, Johns Creek, they don't advertise their CZIM meetings in a newspaper. They do all the other outreach that we do. They just don't do this additional step, probably because it's not really very effective. Roswell does do this, and so that's the reason why we bring this to your attention. We thought that it made sense for you to consider a change. And if a change is made, it would simply be a change to the text that you see, kind of hard to read up on the screen, but to those specific pages of the code that speaks to where the CZIM is advertised instead of the Milton Herald. We'd still obviously provide that information, but on the city's website, on the city's calendar, through social media. And of course, if we anticipate something of general community interest, of widespread community, we would then take that extra step. It just wouldn't be mandated. So that is what we would like for you to consider this evening.
Any questions for Dana? One question I have, given that the Milton Herald requires us to get it to them prior to publication, so it's 10 days in advance of the meeting and then at least a week before
Correct.
that.
Yes.
So this might help us shorten the total cycle time, or to some extent, because the person would have an extra week to make the deadline, to get everything moving.
That's certainly true.
Do we still have the option? Like if we felt something was something that was going to be of great
Absolutely.
interest, we could still advertise it.
We
This would
could.
just mean we aren't required to.
We could and we would. We would want to do that. But like I said, a lot of these community meetings are not of that great of an interest to the community, or else they find another way to find out about what's going on. So it's just one means of notifying the community that apparently is not all that effective.
I guess my question is, what percentage of our residents rely on the newspaper, right? How many are not computer savvy? How many don't go online, aren't part of social media? Are we excluding them from letting them know anything? And again, I always fall to more transparency, the better.
Right.
I
do accept that. That was interesting. Only one person went to any CZIM meetings last year. So
Again, it's a cost benefit.
Yeah.
We would obviously do as much as we can, but we have to look at the resources. We have staff time, there's an expense. Are we getting the bang for the buck that we're looking for with this notification? It's only one means of notification. If it's effective, we should do it. But from last year's example, it's just not really all that effective.
Well, and I think too, and a lot of the people that come to the meetings have been told or something and put together. I don't think that they even knew there was a meeting going on.
do we have any public comment on this?
We do. We have one public
Okay.
comment.
Great. We
Mary-
can always ask more questions. Jane.
Mary Cronk.
Evening. My name is Mary Cronk, and I live at 600 Hickory Mill Lane. I always appreciate the city saving money and streamlining processes. However, I don't think that the CZIM portion of the text amendment, section 12.3.2.a, is beneficial. So please consider the following. While only one person attended CZIM last year, keep in mind that there were only 4 CZIM last year. In 2020, 21, and 22, there were also only 4 CZIM each year. In 23, there were 6. The city spent between $480 and $680 on Herald advertisements for the CZIM last year, which is a very small portion of our city's budget. We don't know how that one person who attended CZIM last year found out about the meeting because the city currently doesn't track that information. What if that one person who cared enough to participate in the CZIM found out about it through the Herald notification? We don't know. If there had been no notification in the Herald, perhaps no one would have attended CZIM last year. Again, we don't know. Not everyone receives a city newsletter or is on Facebook. Not everyone lives close enough to a rezoning to receive a letter about it, or drives by a location with a green sign. And not everyone will proactively search the city calendar for CZIM agenda items. Knowing that one single method of notification doesn't work for everyone, why save $680 a year by removing CZIM notification from the Herald without knowing how many people rely on the Herald to know what is on the agenda? So to that end, I have some suggestions. Please don't recommend approval of the CZIM portion of this text amendment. Instead, consider adding a column to the CZIM sign-in sheet, asking people how they learned about the CZIM, so that data could be collected over the next year. And then that data could be used to determine if there is justification to remove notification in the Herald. To save taxpayer dollars, consider having the cost of the Herald notifications for use permits and variance requests, have those paid by the applicants. They pay for permits. It might follow that they also pay for notification about their specific variance or use permit. And then lastly, I've developed a spreadsheet with dates that I believe would allow for 2 instead of 3 Herald notifications for text amendments and use permits for the remaining months this year, except for April and July. And I'd like to share that with community development to see if the schedule is feasible. And if it is feasible, it could streamline the process and save taxpayer dollars. Thank you, Planning Commission and staff, for your time and consideration of these suggestions.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
I'm in favor of greater transparency. So I think the cost benefit, $400, $500, $600 a year, I think it's always better from a government perspective to be more transparent.
I agree. I don't think there's a time to be less transparent.
I was ready to be snarky about what year it is and how paper is gone. But I appreciate Ms. Cronk's comments. Yeah,
This is the
so-
only one with his tablet up here working.
I know. But, I mean, people do things differently, so.
With that, I'll entertain a motion on RZ 2503.
Motion to reject the text amendment proposed, RZ 2503.
And actually, it's recommend rejection.
Motion to recommend rejection of the text amendment to Article 12, Administration Section 12.3.2.a, RZ 2503.
I'll second.
Do we need to add anything about trying to survey the community, understand what the utilization of that is, or do we
I mean,
just?
we can do that, just.
You can?
From
That doesn't require the
Yeah.
code amendment.
Now, is that, we talked about the CCIM. Is there something to do, I'm sorry, well, there's a motion and a second, and I'm asking for clarification because there's something also about demolition permits.
That's a separate, let's see.
Let's move on to that one.
Well,
Let's get a
Oh,
vote
so-
before we do.
Okay, but it's.
They're all
it's-
part of RZ.
They're all
2503.
part of RZ 2503 though, right?
All right, let's
Right,
move on
yeah.
to that.
So I
Okay.
guess we should need to hear this.
Yeah, you don't
So
want to,
do-
yeah.
So
I will
I.
rescind my motion. Is that how that
rescind your
works?
Second, yeah,
Second.
So
yeah, hold that thought. Go ahead, Diana.
So you're withdrawing your motion. for
I'm
now.
withdrawing the motion.
Yeah,
All right.
Then I'll withdraw my second, darn it.
yeah.
So
okay.
we also looked at demolition permits, and they require a public hearing in front of the Design Review Board. But there's an advertising requirement that says that those permits need to be advertised 30 days in advance of that DRB meeting. Of course, we have to send the ad in even beyond that 30 days. And so that's really causing a problem for some folks who have to go in front of the DRB for their demolition permit, are not aware that there's a 30-day, and it just really creates a bottleneck for some folks in terms of their development process. A lot of these permits get approved and they're fairly standard. It's just a requirement that the DRB reviews those permits. And so we're recommending that the 30 days be reduced to 15 days, kind of help people with that extra 2 weeks.
Makes sense.
Questions on that, comments? Great. Any public comment on that part? Okay, sorry.
I have more questions on the first section. So if we keep it in if we keep notice in the legal organ of the city, could we also stipulate that it needs to start, it also needs to be done in social media? Are we doing that already? Do we do a social? Where are we publicizing?
CCIM.
Social media,
CCIM.
city website, calendar.
And
just
then we
haven't read
also,
this.
if people are on the whatever e-blast or newsletters, the communications department gives information on upcoming meetings and all that, so.
So are all of those outlets considered legal organs of the
They're
city?
not,
Official-
they're
No.
not,
Legal
and that's.
organ
Only
is
the Milton Herald.
Yeah, they're not, and that's the whole thing, the CZIM is not required to, it's not the ZPL zoning procedure law, there's not any requirements of the state to even advertise it. And we call it the legal organ just because that's how we refer to
Sure.
the Milton Herald, so.
I guess I just don't see it, maybe I haven't read it thoroughly enough. Do we stipulate that we will send it out on social media and other things electronically in
I
addition
mean,
to the Herald?
it's just policy
happens.
that I would have to say Milton does an incredible job with their communications.
Yeah.
And, very, very detailed and very often. So there's nothing in the code that says, oh, we have to do X, Y, and Z outreach through social media or whatever, so.
Right.
I think if we were recommending to do away with the Herald, we'd want to add something like that to be sure that it was communicated somehow. But we're just saying.
Well, we have to because other than CZIM, it must be advertised.
Yeah, but
And you have to say what you're legal, yeah.
But
That's my question, is should we add that language in now to say social media, or do we leave it as
I would
is?
say try to keep it as close to zoning law requirements is my opinion, but add the CCIM because we do it now and we want to continue that transparency is where I think the group was going. I have to say, before I got into this job and used to go to all those meetings, a lot of times what I liked about the CZIM is you could just go and sit in a circle and say, Robin, I don't understand this, explain it to me, which isn't really available in this forum. So it was a good way to do give and take Q&A on items.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's my goal when I have them is it's more of giving education to people. And if they come to a meeting and they're like, oh, wow, I'm good with that. I don't have to go to any more meetings. Or, oh, wow, I'm really struck by that. I really need to go to all the rest of the meetings.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And if we're, because we're maintaining the status quo, should we have that or not? I mean,
I'm kind of the view that says, keep the CZIM letter, reject
That's right.
the text amendment, but accept the text amendment to
That's right.
reduce 30 days to 15 days is what I'm thinking.
That's the second part related to
Okay, Brian,
demolition.
you want to give it a try
Whew,
again?
we're giving it a go here. So, regarding text amendment RZ 2503, I'd like to make a motion to recommend rejection of the text amendment to Article 12, Administration, Section 12.3.2.a regarding public hearing and notice amendments, and recommend for Section 12.8.6.e for demolition permits, public hearing to amend notification requirements from 30 days to 15 days.
and I'll second that also.
Okay.
Just to be clear, that motion was to recommend approval.
Motion to recommend, okay.
The word approval didn't get in there.
Okay, motion to recommend approval
Of the latter.
of the latter.
Okay. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
And then
Okay.
the final item is an amendment. It's actually more of a clarification to parking location limitations within agricultural and single-family districts. Most of the city, as you know, is AG agricultural, but most of the city is also developed for residential purposes. It's not really developed agriculturally. And so we've had issues in some cases where there are folks who bring in equipment and things that are not necessarily appropriate within residential areas. We've had code enforcement cases where folks have brought in a lot of grading equipment and other heavy-duty commercial equipment onto their agriculturally zoned property and think that that's okay, but it's not okay in residential areas. So we just want to clarify that in single-family districts and agricultural districts used for single-family dwelling, the storing of commercial vehicles and construction equipment is prohibited except when there is an active building permit on the property. And when we talk about commercial vehicles, we're talking about heavy construction equipment. We're not talking about commercial vehicles where somebody has a plumbing company and they drive the truck home. We're talking about the big equipment. And that's really what this is about. It's really to give code enforcement a tool in the occasional situation where we've had problems.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I guess one question I would have is Ashford Gardens is AG1, but it's not residential, and they park their commercial vehicles there.
So they have a use permit for a landscape business.
Right.
So, and they have particular regulations that, and I think they received a couple or three variances. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah.
But I think their commercial vehicles are behind the
Right.
fence. And then in use permits for landscape businesses, they're only allowed 2 or 3 outside of a building. And then they had to build a structure to put the rest of their equipment in.
Right. And then if I go to Scottsdale Farms, which as a nursery doesn't need a use permit, and on their AG1 land, for example, they have a semi-tractor trailer where they store
Pine straw or something?
pine straw.
But they're not a property that's used for a single-family dwelling.
It's only if it's used as a
It's got to be a single-family district or agricultural district used for a single-family dwelling.
dwelling.
So I have 36 acres on Doris Road. I have 3 pieces of equipment that exceed this 11,000 pound capacity. A tractor, a skid steer, and an excavator.
So tractor is excluded.
Okay. And
If
I
you see under
use-
heavy construction equipment, the tractor has been removed. So what else do you have?
Technically, I have a skid steer and technically a track loader and an excavator. I used them for 2 hours today, just clearing debris.
Moving stuff.
Plays in the dirt.
I used the excavator for 4 hours a week ago to clear trees that fell across my driveway. I won't live without that equipment. So I don't know if we need to take it to 15,000 pounds. I don't know where the 11,000 came from, but that would have
That's an
a material
existing-
impact on my ability to live where I live.
Yeah, that's an existing definition.
Yeah.
Or what about if the same 36 acres was owned by a truck driver who drives a semi?
Yeah, do you want that in your residential neighborhood?
No, I
Somebody
don't-
parking that?
No.
No. I keep them in a barn, but
So that's the other thing too, is are we talking about outside parking? If they put it in a
Oh,
building?
absolutely. Yeah, most
but
of
I
these
don't-
things can't be parked inside unless you've got a pretty significant
Barn.
barn. And most people don't use their barns in that way. It's also, remember, in residential areas, we're complaint driven. So if you've got if you've got 3 or 5 acres and these things are behind your home where nobody can see them, it's not going to generate a complaint. The
my
issues
neighbors
that
like
we,
me because I come help them out of a jam all the time.
How many acres do you have?
36. Yeah,
the
Well, if we-
issues that
could
we've had
we-
are all complaint
Could we say
generated.
I see what you're saying.
to your point, acreage, in other words, you had 15, because 15 or 20, you're not acres, you're not really affecting too much single family
Yeah.
in that location. Then could you do it by,
Where have we had an issue?
15 acres?
If I parked all the equipment on the roadside, I would expect to get a lot of complaints because I wouldn't like looking at it either, but we don't do that.
Right, I mean, should it be visible from the roadway?
Can you go, so is it just adding commercial vehicles? So, okay.
And location of parking.
It's any vehicle used in business. So I don't use it in a business, a trade, or an industry. Or motorized equipment that has 2 or more of the following. I mean, number 1 and number 3. I think both of mine exceed.
Now, how many other people, are like you that have,
There's probably 3
Large.
people on Doris that have.
yeah, oh yeah, I could see, we're trying to promote more acreage
Yeah.
and
So
more
here's-
less homes.
Here's a question. A neighbor of mine is doing some landscaping in the back of his house, and he's moving boulders and stuff like that. So he has construction equipment. I mean, these are, I don't know how much they weigh, but they can lift boulders. And they're in the back, and it's taken him a week to do it. But he probably doesn't need a building permit to do landscaping.
That's not going to be an issue because if it's there for a week, by the time code enforcement gets out there and gives them time to take corrective action, the week is over. We're talking about situations where people just permanently park their heavy-duty construction equipment, their grading
They're
equipment.
using
I love the intent.
Storage.
I mean, I'm all
Yeah.
completely aligned with the intent.
How many complaints have we had that we've had to address?
We've
So
had,
this-
we've had a couple of complaints, and we have one situation that may end up in court.
What's the kind of big picture on that? What's the situation on that one?
Context, yeah.
Just broad stroke.
It's a person that owns a grading, excavating company that stores all of their commercial equipment on their residential property, and the neighbors are not happy about that.
I can see that.
And it's not a piece of property where they can be hidden in the backyard, and screened by a lot of woods. They're right where you can see them, right along the road.
If we look at the second paragraph, would you be covered here? Because it says, by adding a paragraph within the agriculture in single-family districts, it provides the allowance of commercial vehicles. It's not a commercial vehicle, right?
It's not a commercial vehicle. So if you look here on
So
this,
they define commercial vehicle on
Okay,
the next page.
commercial vehicle is any vehicle
Okay,
used in
two.
business, trade, industry, or motorized equipment that has
Yeah, okay,
two of the
never mind.
following.
I was hoping commercial got you out, but it's not for
I thought
business.
that too. Still think that we could.
I
do
think
it by
conceptually
acreage.
there, we're working on the wording.
If you moved it
Okay.
to 13,000 pounds, I personally, I'm not suggesting a law for Trey, but I
So
think,
the problem is that that portion of the code is in a different section that we haven't advertised to amend
Yeah.
the definition, so.
Well, we can certainly, if that's what you prefer, we can bring this back at a future time with, that
think-
definition.
What's the definition of commercial vehicles, I guess? Is it defined or is it just
It
considered?
is.
It is.
What if we had
It's in,
commercial use vehicles?
So it says, any vehicle used in a business, trade, industry, or motorized equipment that has two or more of the following characteristics, and it goes through 9 different items, I don't know.
Sure, if it was commercial, if we use, instead of commercial vehicles, we had commercial use vehicles. Would that allow, that's not, you're not using a commercial, it's not a commercial use vehicle.
I mean, I don't know how to stipulate like for farming or
For agriculture comes in though. I mean,
property maintenance. I don't know how to.
Yeah.
I think the issue is more that obviously you have a large piece of property, you have a lot of trees. Nobody ever even knows that you have that equipment unless they were on your property.
That's why,
So it really is a issue of,
that's why I say it's bound on your property size, the acreage.
but I mean, you could have a large acreage and you store it next to your neighbor.
Yeah,
So
it
can
could
we
be
add
really
see
clear
it,
cut,
so-
so we
It's
can
not,
see it.
not,
Yeah.
not stored view, can't be within the view shed. Is there something that we could apply there? This is, it can't be stored for longer than X days within view.
Well, the view shed is a specific width of property along a roadway.
And it doesn't apply to your lot technically, because you're not in a platted subdivision. The only thing that applies was that we reviewed the architecture of your house, even though we can't see it. So,
So does this apply to me then?
well, the rural view shed doesn't, but this
This would.
technically would if somebody complained about it.
And then I would buy the same exact machine in a smaller version to be under the 11,000 pounds.
And if we added commercial vehicles used in a trade? Like you're doing business with it as opposed to personal use?
That's hard to, that wouldn't apply, it wouldn't help in this particular situation because where we've received the complaint, it is used by the business owner, but he also uses it on his own property. So, that would be a loophole that would kind of undermine the intent here.
Commercial vehicles not used exclusively for
Exclusively is the
personal
word,
use. Or something to that effect,
That's the language I was thinking of too.
yeah.
Because there are a bunch of people on large tracts that cannot maintain their own property without that
Right.
equipment.
I agree with you. Totally.
All right, so you'd like to add the words "not used exclusively for personal use."
Or somebody come up with better wording that doesn't say use used twice.
Okay,
This is when we need to meet the wordsmith.
The wordsmith.
Yes.
Commercial vehicles.
Utilized,
Pardon?
utilized.
Commercial vehicles not utilized exclusively for personal purposes. That work? The exclusive then would help Trey. But it
Or would
wouldn't help the person that's like, I use it for myself, but I
Right. Or would it,
rent it out too.
would it be easier to add it after property? Easier to add something or use a 100 for 100% personal use? You're already saying it's permitted only when there's an active building permit on the property or used exclusively for personal use. Would that be a better place for it?
On the next page. So on the next page, to keep it, make it not so cumbersome, so do that. And I know during construction associated with an active building permit or land disturbance permitted or used exclusively for personal use. So add it there rather than at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little less clunky.
Can we just call this the tray rule?
No.
The tray stuff?
No.
Okay. Anybody want to take a stab on this? Otherwise, I will. I recommend approval of, I recommend that we recommend, I move that we recommend approval of RZ 2504 as presented with the addition of the words at the end of paragraph whatever the next page is, to state, or used exclusively, or utilized exclusively for personal purposes.
So you're speaking of C, heavy construction, that's at the end of that paragraph?
We don't have paper copies, so, and the page is on the wrong page, so I don't know where to add it. I think I'm talking about that, but I can't see it.
It's showing up right now on the right-hand side, right?
Okay.
So if you
So
go to
that's
the
the new
next
8.
page.
Okay. Okay.
Read that opening.
No,
See if you like that opening.
but then we'd have to open that up, and that's not in front of us. I'd have to re-advertise. So I was actually proposing it be added on the next page language, not this page language, but I can't see the next page language.
Okay, so if we go to the next slide,
I
so that's
think-
what I was,
Or do we have to change it in both 916C and the other one?
Yeah, we just add the same language.
Okay.
We would work that into
So
the same, under
I'll
C.
restate my proposal to add the language or utilized exclusively for personal use to both 8 and 916-C
yeah.
at the end. I'll just rush in with that second.
I'll second, big time.
It's been moved.
And for the record, it's really fun. Y'all should come over and drive the equipment.
long as I
sometime.
don't-
I think
I
that,
can't pay you to do it, though.
I think
No.
if we had passed this, there'd been, other than yourself, I think we'd had quite a few fellows and farmers and so forth with large acreage in here
Yeah.
complaining about this.
Yep.
So I think it was good.
Okay,
that you
it's been
brought
moved
that
and
up.
seconded. Can we have a vote? I'll call the vote on RZ 2504. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
One opposed. 3, 4, 4, 1 against. New business, quarterly tree waiver update.
There is none because there has been no new requests for tree waivers in the first quarter of 2025. So,
Okay,
Sandra
call the
didn't-
next item, old business Deerfield implementation plan update by Ms. Robin McDonald.
yes, default to me.
You're just everything.
Okay, I'm going to come up here because
Take one. I think she just.
I will send out an email with this information, but just for an update, Right now, we have a draft. Yesterday, we had the CZIM for the text amendment to the Deerfield form-based code that is implementing many of the concepts and proposed changes, which is not huge. There's, but there are some. And what we would like to do is to have small meetings of 3 or less of the planning commission members or briefings, because we can't have a quorum, but we want you guys to be really familiar with the proposed changes instead of just throwing it on you on the 23rd of April. We want to prepare you. So I will be sending out an email and trying to come up with some dates for 2 or 3 meetings between April 8th and April 18th. Just for heads up on that. Also,
And if somebody is traveling out of town, could you do this via Zoom?
sure, yeah, we can do that. But I think that's a fair, it's like 10 days, so hopefully we can work it out between everybody. We will also be providing the urban design manual before the planning commission, because I think it's really essential for you to have a look at that. I know we distributed like 6 weeks ago, but it wasn't really ready for prime time, so to speak. So by the next couple weeks, it will be ready. And we were going to present it also at the April meeting, but I made the point, well, a lot of these changes are precipitated from the concepts of the urban design manual. So I would like you guys to have.
Urban design manual or Deerfield design manual?
Well, it's the Deerfield Urban Design Manual. I don't know. So obviously April 23rd will be a big meeting for that proposal. Also, we will have a joint work session with the Design Review Board on May 6th, which is a Tuesday, about the Urban Design Manual. So we'll be sending out the notifications on that as well. Just continuing on with the text amendment, there will be a council work session on May 12th on the text, on the Deerfield form-based code. And then the goal is to have a final decision and vote in front of the council on May 19th. And at that same May 19th meeting, they will adopt by resolution the implementation plan, and also the urban design manual. And we will be receiving, there will also be an opportunity for the video fly through. I believe it was shown at one of the meetings. I get confused at which one, but that is going to be improved and be more better and more impactful, I guess I should say. And I'm hoping we're going to be able to show that to you also on the 23rd. And I think that's about it. If you guys have any questions, I'm kind of the pinch hitter for this. So again, if you have any questions, please forward it to me and we'll either have Jackie and Tracy assist in answering anything that you guys might
I did have one question. I know
Sure.
they talked a lot about moving the commercial percentages 50-50 to 70-30.
Right, so that's a lot what we're going to talk about. And if you want to have a preview of it all, it's online right now from the CZIM. So if you go to the calendar and click on the packet, so the proposed changes, I did a memo that kind of summarized the changes,
Okay.
and then it's redlined.
Have they decided to go the 70-30 route or?
There are,
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot. I don't have it in
incentives, right?
front of me,
Okay.
but yes, I think for certain northern areas it is, but not for the main area, like around Deerfield, the T6s,
Okay.
that's remaining at 50-50, but they've created some incentives that could get to change that ratio.
Mhm.
So I don't want to
That's fair.
give it unjust information.
I get the sense it's not a blanket approval, but there's a path to get above 50/50.
Right. And so that'll
Or below
be,
50/50,
yeah.
depending on how you look at it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that just concerns me because, again, giving up 40% of our commercial
Yep.
engine is a big concern for me.
It was also presented at a the financials on it was presented at a city council meeting also, not too long ago. And I remember Bernadette's comment was what they talked about would get us to kind of move us from currently 11, 12, 13% commercial revenues to the 20%.
Well, I think she also said that anything, if I remember correctly, I think Bernadette said that anything within those would be taxed as commercial. And I'm like, how can you go and tax a residential piece in the commercial?
Yeah.
Well, I
there's
think
something
that was if it was integrated mixed use. She found out from the tax assessor that, let's say, if you had a commercial first floor and this, the remaining floors were residential, it was taxed as commercial.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's where that part of that.
There's something about that, which is good news, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
again, if we're,
But a lot of the income really was on the impact fees up front. A lot of it. It wasn't so much because a lot of those parcels are already taxed as commercial. They're just not as developed.
Right,
So,
but if we
so
move
that
those
it won't change. What will change is when the value of the property goes up, then you get additional revenue for it. Yeah. So, but
Yeah.
lots of moving parts.
So, and I would add that we have been working with different property owners from all over, whether it's, I realize you received an email from Stone Creek, which the way it's proposed, it wouldn't even come before you because everything would be by right. But there is a proposed change to the transect zones for the Stone Creek property. So, we're going to have to add the regulating plan because it wasn't ready for publication, but we had it at last night's
And that's a
meeting.
parcel where we have zero tax revenue because it's a church.
Correct, yeah.
Today.
So they're looking to sell a portion of their property to a developer and that developer would do a mixed use development in the front of Stone Creek.
So from what I understand is we wouldn't necessarily see the development plans, we would see the rezoning request in that case.
Well, so what is being proposed in the transect in a part of the text amendment is amending the regulating plan with the text amendment. And so that is what you will be seeing. So it's almost like you're going to look at the proposed transect changes for Stone Creek at the same time as the text amendment.
So we will see it, but as a text amendment.
Right.
Let's make sure we're transparent on that with the public.
Right.
What that is, that it's not just buried in a text amendment. Yeah.
No,
They have set up front before they're going to change the transect zones, but.
no,
let's
it's not
be
like
clear.
we're going to put it under the rug and not
Yeah.
talk about it. So it's a very important
Business there.
part of that. And then we're creating sub-districts, and so that's all explained in the text amendment as well. So anyway.
Cool.
great.
And more coming. So we'll have a busy April and early May for Deerfield.
And we also, we have a couple other text amendments coming up in addition to the Deerfield implementation for the next month, as well as in all probability, we'll have a preliminary plat.
So April is more text amendments and preliminary plat, plus then the briefings and the review of the design manual for Deerfield. And then May?
And then May, you'll have a joint work session with DRB to look over the design manual.
Yeah, and what else is on the agenda for May? Anything
I do
yet?
not think we have anything right now for May. It's
Okay.
planning commission meeting, but I could,
Just a heads up, I will not be here the latter part of May. The second half of May, I will not be here. That'll be my one.
then we
meeting.
won't have a meeting. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, no, you'll throw all kinds of stuff. We'll make this easy. Kurt's gone.
Yeah, so,
Same here, Kurt.
Yeah.
Last week in
the
May,
other
I'll be
thing
gone.
is, the other thing as we look for the year is we get to update this year? Like, but it's the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, so we'll have, the next meeting's going to be pretty heavy, but I think Shuba was planning to do an update on that as well.
An update on what we need to update.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So also comp plan.
I believe, and I don't know if Diana, you guys talked about when I think it's toward the end of the year or maybe the third quarter before she really kicks off the update to the conference. Okay.
right,
Any
great.
other questions on what's coming up? The one question, Kurt, you had actually is, we've got a lot of on our agenda, and it sounds like some of it is time sensitive. And I know in the past we've had some challenges with quorum. When can a person, so I know once in a while on city council, they'll have people call in. So what's the policy on remote attendance for planning commission meetings?
We finished building.
Paul's looking at me like, why did you ask?
Yeah,
I was packing up.
2 steps from a clean getaway.
Don't know if it's specifically.
I know one thing they make a big deal out of in city council is you have to be out of the jurisdiction. You can't call in from home.
See, I don't think we have anything that addresses it in the bylaws about voting if you're absent.
I mean, we did it during, it was
COVID.
call in during COVID, but that was emergency procedures.
I'll have to circulate.
You'll look at it and let us know.
Yeah.
Because we do have a lot coming up, and I would just encourage everybody to try to clear their schedule as I sit there going, I got to get off work the day. I have to get off work in time the evening of the May meeting. Elections are coming. Or we start at 6:30. Okay. With that, I'll entertain from Fred a motion to.
I move, we adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Who seconded it? I'm sorry.
Everybody.
The two ends.
That's not fair.
The two ends. Fred and
Fred.
Brian seconded.
Oh, my buddy.